You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the Centresteer Podcast, the only Land Rover podcast on the planet. This is show number 56 for November 2017. This is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. Visit our website, centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to the stories we discussed in today's show. We're also part of the 4x4 Radio Network. I invite you to check out the other 4x4 related shows at 4x4radionetwork.com. I am your host, John Costage, here in Western Pennsylvania. It's a nice, warm, sunny day. Well, warm for this time of year.
Warm-ish.
Warm-ish, admittedly. It's supposed to get to 60 on Tuesday. Joining me via Skype, also from Western Pennsylvania, is Harold. Morgan, unfortunately, is not feeling well, and he is not going to join us today, unfortunately. We have a very, very packed show. I anticipate this may be the first 3-hour Centresteer podcast ever. We have Dave Bobeck, who is a blog writer for Atlantic British and fellow Rover addict. Then we're going to also talk to Veronica Lamond. She's a Landy children's book author. And also James Demer. He's the inventor of the DemerBox Bluetooth speakers. And if that's not enough, Bryan Joslin of Alloy and Grit magazine is going to update us on the magazine and join us for the news. Hi, Bryan.
How's it going today?
Very well. Thanks for joining in. Thanks, everybody, for your comments, likes, follows on Facebook, Twitter, and the emails. Special thanks, of course, to our Patreon subscribers. You can go out to patreon.com/Centresteer for the details on that if you wish to make a monthly contribution. Bryan from Australia shared with us his black four-door Evoque. It's a nice-looking vehicle, and he's offered to be our Australian correspondent. So we may take you up on that, Bryan. Connor on Instagram, he listened to the Switzerland episode. He's friends with Nicola Saunderer, who was interviewed on that, and he shared a video, just to me, it was a video of Nicola's Defender as it went on autopilot. So apparently they had to, they got out of the truck to close a gate, one of the gates that was on the road, and they forgot to put the vehicle into park or take it apparently out of gear, and it started to trundle about on the trail on its own. It was safe.
Unintentional autopilot.
Yes, exactly. That was a nice video.
Gotcha.
Thanks for that, Connor. And Dave messaged us over Facebook. He's looking for tips on buying a Discovery. So I'm going to read you what he sent to me. He says he's listened to all of the podcasts, but he's working his way through them. Apparently kind of probably a glutton for punishment, right, Harold?
Yeah.
But he was wondering if we could do something on looking to buy a used Disco. He likes the style. He grew up looking at Disco ads in National Geographic. He was fascinated with the scenery and accompanied the ads. He's owned several off-road types of vehicles, but Land Rovers have always intrigued him. He's aware the vehicles have certain issues. I think he's being charitable. But as a mechanically inclined person, he's not intimidated by those issues, and he wanted to be able to make an informed purchase and know what to look for on an early 2000 Discovery.
Well, the short answer is don't. But no, seriously, the long answer is it kind of depends on what you want to do with it. However, if you really want to do your own work and do your own thing with it, I think you're probably better off with a first-gen Discovery, which is up through 1999. If you're looking at 2000s, then, that's a Disco 2, and they are a lot harder to work on for a number of reasons. There's more computers, there's fewer things you can service, more of the parts are disposable, if you will. And the odd thing you don't really get until you really get in, way too deep on these things is that into the D2, it's like they took a lot of the room out of stuff. Everything is just a little bit tighter, and so your hands have to be just that much skinnier and longer to reach things. It's just odd. I mean, separating an engine from a transmission, either to pull the engine or pull the transmission, you've got those 3,600 bolts around the back of the engine joining the bell housing to the engine. Not a big deal on a D1, but on a D2, you will be cussing. And you will be cussing, and you will hate that job, and you will say, never, ever again am I going to do that. Just beware, little things like that are more difficult to do on a D2 for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was just BMW thinking they knew better.
What about the rust that happens in the rear door sills there? Is that a D1, D2 issue both, or just a D2?
Oh, I think they all get it. They inherited that trait from the Rangy Classic, to be honest.
It's not as bad on the D2s though. I've had a couple of D2s, and the rust is definitely not as invasive on the D2s as they are on the D1s, at least in the body.
Well, maybe that's by virtue of the D2s being newer.
Yeah.
They haven't had as much time to rust.
Yeah. Or there's some specific things that he can...
I mean, I've seen a lot of very, very rusty D2s, mind you, but I suspect they probably learned a thing or two about surface prep, corrosion protection of the metal before they painted it.
There's specific things he can look for while he's either asking questions or looking underneath the vehicle or in the engine bay or...
Well, I would suggest he do the old British trick, crawl underneath with a hammer and start tapping at stuff. And if the hammer bounces back and sounds nice and metallic, then you're in good shape. But if the hammer makes a very soft thud noise and disappears into the side of the frame, yeah, it run like hell.
Mechanically, is there any like 2 or 3 things that should check that these are warning signs, or if this is a sound, then it's probably a decent truck? Any of those tips? Well,
I mean, general mechanical stuff. If everything works properly and it pulls nicely and it runs smooth and you can't see the color of the exhaust coming out the tailpipe, those are good general indicators. On the D2 side, I will tell you that if you want to go off-road and you want to be able to lock your center diff, you've got the D2s are not necessarily capable of that. Some of them are convertible to that and some are not. After, I think, was it mid-2000, early 2001, somewhere in there, they actually removed all of that mechanism from inside the transfer case. But on the very early ones, the mechanism was still there. They just took the linkage away. So you can retrofit all the diff lock shift linkage from a D1 if you want. After 2000, the last year, the 2004, they finally got smart and put it back in. And actually, it's a really nice mechanism in the 04s. But the other option, of course, is you can pull the whole transfer case and put a D1 transfer case in it and get the job done that way. But just be aware that's a potential thing to look for.
And what about the 3 Amigos that pop up on the D2? Is that runaway, or is there...
Well, if they're lit when you're looking at the truck, then yes, it is a problem you will deal with right away. If they're not lit, then at some day you will probably have that problem to deal with. The 3 Amigos being the ABS traction control and brake warning light. It has to do with the anti-lock brake module having a flaw in it. There's plenty of stuff on the internet about how to deal with that. But as a D2 owner, you will at some point be dealing with that.
But that's not something that would make you immediately run away from.
I'm shied away by that less than I would be with a head gasket issue, which of course is something you worry about in anything with a Rover V8.
Yeah, as a 2-time Disco 2 owner, I can concur with pretty much everything he said there. I've had 3 Amigos on both vehicles. I've done head gaskets on both vehicles.
As we all have.
Yeah. And for certain, there's not a lot of room to work on that, especially if you want to change things like, plug wires. Even a job as simple as that requires really, really small fingers and or removing pieces of the upper intake or whatever. Now it's
to the point where I really don't even. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's definitely a vehicle that you have to be invested in some tools, and I think it really helps to have a network of people around you that have been through some of this before. It's kind of daunting if it's going to be your first Land Rover. It's a bath by fire.
It's a cheap way to get into the hobby in that respect, and you will learn a lot.
Is. Yep.
But I say, just in terms of the pain in the ass factor, if you will, I actually don't like working on D2s and have actually turned D2 work away from my shop just because of stuff I didn't want to deal with, and I was busy enough.
Yeah, I can understand that. I grew up with Bosch vehicles, Land Rover, or BMWs and Volkswagens and stuff. So those the D2 seems a lot more familiar to me, and at least in terms of some of the logic behind it. But
right.
I bought mine with a blown engine, so when you start there and build up, it's a lot less intimidating than buying a running one and waiting for something to happen.
Well, yeah, because when you buy a project, you're going through everything anyway.
Exactly.
Dave, I hope that helps you in your search for a Discovery. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll try to answer them for you. Thanks for asking about purchasing a Discovery too. And now let's get into the news then, shall we? First up, of course, we like to talk about sales, and JLR sales in the United States for October were actually down. There was a 10% decrease of Jaguar sales, and there was a 1% decrease of Land Rover sales. And this is month to month, so this is October of 2016 compared to October of 2017. Overall, there was a 4% decrease for JLR combined. However, JLR is still up 11% in the U.S. Compared to 2016. The president and CEO of JLR North America, he says here that October proved to be a challenging month for U.S. sales, resulting in Jaguar Land Rover coming down slightly from their previous record pace of 2016. Oh, I misread that. So sales were coming down slightly from their record pace of 2016. They're encouraged by the sales of the Jag F-Pace and the Range Rover Velar, and they say that it's bringing new customers into the brand every month. But things still are positive. I think it's just a temporary month, I suspect.
The plus 11% you spoke of is for the year to date?
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. JLR appoints a new CMO. They poached Felix Brot. Oh, geez. I should have done research ahead of time. Felix Brottegram. I think he's German. They poached him from Porsche, and he is now the chief marketing officer of JLR. He's replacing Gerald Mauser, who's retiring from the business at the end of the year. Felix was working in Stuttgart. Space says he'll be tasked with increasing the success of our world-class brands with even greater portfolio of new models designed to delight our customers, delivering experiences they will love for life. End quote.
Yeehaw.
And Felix says he plans to help Jaguar Land Rover and the customer experience, take JLR and the customer experience to the next level.
CMO stands for Chief Marketing Officer?
Correct.
Okay.
And there was an interesting interview with engineering chief Nick Rogers. He is the JLR engineering chief. And the big quote here is, "We've got our mojo back." So I'll call some things out. Nick is the engineering chief or boss of engineering of JLR. He's been with the company since since he started in the field. He's always been with JLR, Land Rover really, since when he started in the field, which I think was in the 80s. In one of the most prominent spots is a picture of Formula Nokia chief executive, along with his famous quote, "We didn't do anything wrong, but we still lost," unquote. And he says that resonates with Rogers. It's a way of saying if you take things for granted, that's the beginning of the end. He has a lot of passion, and he joined the company in 1984 straight out of school as a 16-year-old apprentice when it was British Leyland. Now, here's some little interesting things that have happened that we've heard about, and I guess he's given some credence to. In 2007, the company was on its knees. Ford couldn't make money out of Jaguar side of business, and Land Rover was propping it up. The financial crisis sent shockwaves through the industry, and Ford wanted out. Tata arrived on the scene, paying a bargain £1.3 billion for the business, which had 13,000 UK staff, turning out 250,000 cars. And, quote, "There was some tough moments of survival, no doubt about it. There were times as things moved around when it felt like the sea was coming in and you were on an island." One of his first jobs under Tata's ownership was to present new product plans to management. I was first up and had to tell Ratan Tata, chairman of Tata, we wanted to make everything out of aluminum. Can you imagine what it would be like to tell the head of one of the world's biggest steel companies that? Thankfully, he took it well. JLR is now a world leader in making lightweight cars using aluminum. Making difficult presentations is something Rogers' experience of. When Ford owned him, he was sent to Dearborn, Michigan, to explain why he couldn't do a nip and tuck and turn a Ford Explorer into a Land Rover. I think is for me, anyways, that was the lead buried. I think that's the real headline of this is that Ford wanted. And
the interesting thing about that is that you say that you can't turn a Ford Explorer into a Land Rover, but yet it seems like that's what Jerry is doing to Land Rover, trying to turn them into Ford Explorers.
At least in the looks department.
Well, that's his job, though, is the looks department.
Right. Tata's ownership, JLR has grown exponentially, now employing more than 40,000 UK staff, and they have a quarter of them are engineers, and they sold 604,000 cars. Rogers says, quote, back when things were getting close, I remember Rattan coming into the design studio and spending days talking about our plans for the cars were. And he would actually talk to the engineers about it, and which was a good thing. So, Rattan actually had his hands in the day-to-day activities when things were kind of, I guess, really rocky for both companies, which I think you've said before, Harold.
I love it when a car guy takes charge.
Having seen British car industries collapsing around him during the earlier part of his career, as a lack of support, interest, quality issues, and industrial action took their toll, the new owner's approach left a huge impression on Rogers, especially as some say JLR was at times days and even hours away from financial collapse. Another buried lead, I think.
I'm still working on his comment about how the sea is rising and you're on an island. It's like, well, yeah, but it's England. You're always on an island.
So the long-term approach paid off. The company had sales of £24.3 billion, pre-tax profit of £1.6 billion, despite investing £3.4 billion into R&D and new facilities. JLR is now identified as one of the world's coolest brands. A suggestion that JLR got swagger as it enjoys its success doesn't sit well with Rogers. Quote, I prefer we got our mojo back. The mojo can trace back to the 40s and Jaguar founder Sir William Lyons, who Rogers describes as a hero. And he talks then about coming out of the war and the World War II and the things that the Jaguar had to do to keep going, and what Rover cars did to keep going with the Land Rover. He adds saying that he worked at the former British Leyland and later Rover plants at Canley and Longbridge, which are now shuttered. Quote, what's there now? A Sainsbury's? I'm determined I don't want to walk my grandchildren around the Heritage Motor Museum and say, this is what this used to be. I want to tell them about the cool stuff we made, the exciting things we got up to and are still going on. I want it to be we created jobs, livelihoods, and we really made a difference. He's known for using the word authentic, and questioned on his repeated use of the word, he describes it as being key to his job in creating cars customers want. Quote, if we're selling a car to customers, it's got to be what we say it is, unquote, citing Land Rover's ability to take on all terrain. Failure for him would be what he describes as fur coat cars. They might look good, but aren't practical. Obviously informs the Velar, the Range Rovers, all the Range Rovers, and even the Discoveries and the Evoque, and I think even the new Defender coming up. And finally here, he has a XF Sport Brake and a Range Rover he drives, but mostly they stay at the office while he drives competitor and test cars. One of his hobbies, I think you would appreciate this, Harold, he has restored, or is in the process of doing so, a 1946 Jaguar XK120.
Right on.
Vintage Land Rovers, other Jaguars, a Mini, and he as well as a Massey Ferguson tractor, and even a JCB telehandler. I don't know what that is.
He's just like covering all ends of the British spectrum there.
What's a JCB telehandler?
JCB is like a big manufacturer of earth-moving equipment, basically. Okay. Backhoes, excavators, that sort of thing. The telehandler model itself I'm not familiar with, but yeah, JCB is like, Caterpillar is over here.
That's Nick Rogers. He's the engineering chief of JLR, and I think that sounds like, at least on the engineering side, it seems like it's in good hands. He seems to understand, they want to make cars that people like and do what they say they're going to do, which probably goes to the point.
And I like that he gets the history of the company, and he appreciates that, and the fact that, one of his heroes is Sir William, because, Sir William was the man.
All right, Jaguar Land Rover to roll out more models to spruce up demand. Tata Motors net has tripled to 25 billion rupees. So they're obviously making decent money. Profits have jumped in the 6 quarters after the luxury brand began selling new models. JLR's deliveries in China, its top market, have expanded 27%. I think that's one of the big takeaways from this article. JLR's scale is smaller than its peers. The automaker's margins compare with Mercedes, General Motors, and Toyota. That's because the company focuses on premium brands and new products, which can limit discounting. I think those were the two takeaways from that article. It was less about they're coming out with, the titles as they're going to come up with, roll out new models to spruce up demand, but I think it's more they're staying in the premium brand area, and that China, as we've known and we've talked about before, is their main market now. And specific model news, if you have a 2017 Range Rover or Range Rover Sport, there's a recall over the instrument cluster. So the instrument cluster may intermittently go blank, failing to show important information and increasing the risk of a crash. And apparently there's a software fix. So if you have one of those, there's 22,000 models of the full-size Range Rover and the Range Rover Sport.
Yeah, because when it goes blank, you might miss the appearance of the Three Amigos.
Thank you. The 2018 Discovery, they're adding a diesel option at all trims.
Excellent.
Yes, was actually pretty interesting. So before it was only available on the HSE and the HSE luxury trims. Now it's available on the SE trim. Choosing the diesel adds $2,000 to the base price of any trim level. And there's a bunch of other things that they're adding on, but the one for us is you can now get the diesel throughout the entire Discovery 5 range.
It's $2,000 to the price of a new vehicle is a bargain for a diesel, because I mean a lot of other brands, they charge more than that, and the reality is you're gonna make up for that in the resale value.
It's a 254 horsepower turbo diesel 3-liter V6 with 8-speed automatic transmission. That's at the SE trim level. As I said previously, it was only available at the higher levels. The gasoline engine remains. It's a 340 horsepower supercharged 3-liter V6, also an 8-speed. Oh, here's the ratings I was looking for. The EPA ratings for the diesel is 21, 26, 13. That's city, highway combined. The gas is 16, 21, 18. That's interesting. The combined is better on the gasoline than on the diesel.
I wonder if that's a typo. It doesn't sound right.
That's got to be a typo, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they might have had those.
Because the combined is almost always like halfway between the city and the highway.
Right.
Yeah.
As it should be, because the combined cycle is a mix of the two.
And if you were thinking about getting a 3-door Range Rover Evoque, you can no longer do that. At least in the United States, they are eliminating that from the range. The 3-door will be sold in other markets around the world, but not here in the U.S. The 5-door and the convertible will continue.
When are they eliminating the 3-door?
Effective with the 2018 model.
All right, so people still have time. If you want one, like run out now and get it.
Probably going to be a rarity then here because they didn't sell many of those.
Ooh, a collector's item.
Into some non-specific model news. JLR is going to take aim at second life batteries. I found this to be very interesting. It goes into all of the, moving to full electrification, but they're working with some University of Warwick and another company in the UK about what to do with batteries after a car company is done using them. So they're investigating that aspect of it. And my highlights on this article have all disappeared, so I can't remember exactly what I was looking at. Thank you. That failed.
So this is some sort of recycling program?
There's a recycling, and then there's also boosting the battery lifetimes in some cases. So I think maybe somehow regenerating. Maybe it's not clear clearly.
Like a refurbishment or something,
maybe
or a rebuild,
or repurpose even. Maybe maybe when their batteries are done, they might drop them off at your house, maybe, and connect them up to something. I don't know. It's not clear. Ooh. They don't say that. It's just they're thinking about it, which is instead of just, hey, we're going to make a bunch of have a bunch of these batteries, and then they're going to go and do the fill. Okay, what are we going to do with them now? When we know that in 5, 10, 7 years something has to happen with them. So
that is a very good, important thing, and I'm glad somebody's thinking about that, because they do have a lifespan, and what do you do with them? And conventional lead acid batteries now they get cut up and they pull the lead out of them and they recycle all that stuff, but it's kind of a labor-intensive process. If you can find some sort of useful life for the battery that doesn't require breaking it down and melting it down, so to speak, getting the components out of it, I think it's a better thing, especially for the newer battery technologies that have a lot of nasty things in there that you probably don't want to have to dig out.
Yes. And don't some of those batteries have rare earths in them that are also difficult to mine and obtain? There's a limited supply. So and the mining and manufacture of the battery from those materials has a pretty significant environmental impact, and that's sort of my gripe against electric vehicles, is that they're not perfectly clean because there is that impact of manufacturing. So this might be a way to reduce that footprint, if you will. And so, the battery technology discussion goes along with this interesting headline: driverless cars on British roads as JLR moves ahead in race for autonomy. So JLR has quietly started testing driverless cars on British roads that are simultaneously being used by the general public. This is the first time a UK-based manufacturer has unleashed such technology on the open road. Ralph Spaeth, chief executive of JLR, quote, "We stand on the brink of a mobility revolution. The impact of the change we are about to embrace will be huge across all sectors of the UK economy. The opportunities are great. This mobility revolution will change lives profoundly." And as we know, the UK... I think in 2025 is going to wants to eliminate the sale of new internal combustion engines. Britain already has a head start over many nations in autonomous vehicles because the UK never ratified the Vienna Convention. I found this also interesting. The legislation requires that every driver shall at all times be able to control his vehicle. The UK, therefore, does not have to rewrite any laws in order for test driving vehicles on public roads. So apparently, I guess that applies to the rest of Europe, then, right? That they have a challenge in doing driverless cars.
Well, they just have to work around the laws or write new ones.
JLR's investment goes along with Volkswagen. They're investing 10 billion euros with local partners to develop electric vehicles in China. The Beijing government is seeking to encourage car companies to invest in battery vehicles there in hope that China, the world's largest car market, will become a center for the emerging technology. The U.S. is no longer the headquarters, the center of cars in the world.
The Earth does not revolve around us anymore.
No, it does not. No, it does not.
But it's interesting you mentioned the factory testing the driverless vehicles, considering that earlier in the show you mentioned one of our listeners sent us a video of an unintentional test of an driverless car by a private owner.
Yes, exactly. Yes. But that was in a controlled situation or not. It was for short duration, Harold. Short duration. JLR is working on it as a
limited test,
as every company should be working on it. If you're not already, you're going to be behind the times if you're not doing it.
Get on the bandwagon, so to speak.
Yes, and actually, the JLR News put out a short video of them doing these public trials of their self-driving cars. So if you want to see that, they actually show a little bit of it. There's people in the vehicle, but they're not touching the pedals, they're not touching the steering wheel, and it stops for pedestrians and it makes turns. So you can check that out. And they also say that Coventry joins 12 cities worldwide in these public trials. I don't know if that's strictly JLR or not, though. And then related or not, I'm surprised this hasn't happened already, but I also don't like the prospect. But Ford has been granted a patent for autonomous off-road driving system. This is a U.S. only, that I can tell. It could be used for a van, minivan, taxi, bus, or any other vehicle. So they have had the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has granted Ford Global Technologies a patent for off-road autonomous driving system, noted in the patent as not limited to pickups or traditional off-road vehicles. It could size up an environmental obstacle like a ditch or boulder field and potentially transverse the obstacle without manual input.
Is there really much need for taxi cabs and minivans off-road?
That's what I was wondering. Well, I guess it's bound to happen that someone would actually patent it, although Land Rover had already been working on that a couple of years ago. They had their terrain-based speed adaptation, which registered road-level hazards such as standing water. They had an overhead clearance assist that scanned for potential damage from above. I guess that maybe Ford's kind of parroting off of some of that.
I think it's great they're getting into the technology. Don't get me wrong. I just find it amusing that they single out those particular segments.
I guess it might make some sense if you want to. You could take a vehicle and it would be autonomous, and it could take supplies to some location that it would be risky for a human to do it. Is that, I guess?
Well, I guess if you wanted to, if you didn't have a car but you wanted to go geocaching, you hire an Uber to take you there or something.
I suppose there's on the pleasure side. Yeah, I suppose that's the case. I saw it more as after an earthquake, and they could send in a fleet of these with supplies, and maybe a human would be at less risk if they were driving. They would take. They might not take the risk to drive in.
Driverless cargo trucks. Okay.
Yeah. That was okay. Kind of my thought.
And that's what I was thinking too. It's probably got a more commercial or or even military application than pleasure.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the military application too. That would probably that makes some sense. I also thought off-world too. You could if you did that, you could send a vehicle up to Mars, and it could then better navigate than it could currently.
Would the patent apply at that point?
That would have to go through the Mars Patent and Trademark Office.
There you go.
Yes. Didn't we have an article or talk about, or I read something lately that Ford was going to de-emphasize passenger vehicles in the future? Do you guys remember that? Did you hear that?
I don't recall hearing that, but
No, it makes some sense, but no, I don't remember specifically reading that.
I'm going to have to go back and check and do some digging later.
Ford's strong point for quite a long time has been trucks. Mind you, their thrust has been making the trucks much more like a passenger car, so it's in that sense kind of an about face. But the vehicle itself has not been about the passenger car for a long time for them.
Yeah. But outside the U.S., I mean, their actual passenger cars seem to do pretty well and are usually well regarded.
True.
That is news on autonomous front. And finally, this is a product thing that's supposed to come out, and probably not true news, but I found it interesting. I thought we should maybe talk about it a bit. ARB is coming out with Lynx, which is a vehicle accessory interface. And this has different modules in it, and you could add different sensors in there. You'll have a compressor and pressure control for your tires, and this would all be delivered to your smartphone. You'd have a central hub that you would install. There's a switchboard accessory, so you can control lighting. If you had accessory lights, or you had some off-road lights, or maybe some interior lights, you could hook all those up. You can look at your battery. There's a battery monitor built into it. So a lot of I guess it does. I suspect it plugs into the ODB. I can never say that ODB port because it has a speedometer. OBD. Onboard diagnostics.
It is not a database call.
Oh, come on. And it looks like it also has an air suspension control. If you had one of those, you could, which I think. It seems like the most interesting thing about this is it would have that air suspension control, so you could manually adjust it if you were adding it on, especially to an aftermarket edition.
I'm not thrilled with the notion of something that intricately electronic being in charge of vehicular functions, the suspension, the lights, that sort of thing. Because you get out to look at an obstacle and drop your phone in the mud, all of a sudden your lights and your suspension don't work anymore.
Well, or at least it's more difficult to control them. That doesn't mean they would stop working, but
well, it depends. I mean, are we certain of that?
Yeah,
if there was a fail-safe mode, that's one thing. But if it's all being controlled by your phone and an app on that phone, I think that's a big risk.
Right. So that's out there. I think the price. I don't think there's even a price for it yet. But they just announced it, and I thought it was interesting to bring up that there is. I'm actually surprised someone hasn't done this already, to have all that information in one place that you could see and control. I know there are ways of doing that for normal on-road cars, but for like this off-road application, that's the first I've seen.
I've seen like instrument apps and things that allow you to view the functions, engine functions, that sort of thing. I've seen that. But in terms of bidirectional control, I think this is kind of new territory. At least the packaging of it by an accessory manufacturer, I think, is new.
So if anybody does buy one of those, let us know how it works. We'd be interested to hear that if you end up getting one for Christmas, say. So that's the news for November of 2017. And now we're going to talk with Bryan Joslin, who's the editor of Alloy and Grit magazine, which just completed its first-year run as the North America's independent Land Rover journal. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
That was from my own memory. I did not refer to my notes.
That's very good.
Aren't you excited?
Yeah, It's a mouthful, but we wanted to distinguish from what Rover North does with their magazine as well. Ours is independent. Theirs is obviously an extension of another business, but that's why the mouthful.
It's a great magazine. It's wonderful, and I'm glad it's out there. My favorite thing is the pictures that you have. They're fantastic. Tell us how year one has gone, and what's been your favorite article or favorite thing that you've done, and any challenges that you've encountered.
Oh yeah, a whole year full of challenges.
This is your 1 year your 1 year checkup, by the way, apparently.
Yeah. A year ago we were talking. We had, I think we had shown you some digital proofs of what was at the printer.
Correct.
The last time we talked. Yeah. So yeah, now we've got 4 issues under our belt, and it's certainly been a learning experience. Frankly, the easiest part, and I say that with a grain of salt, the easiest part is actually putting together the magazine. The bigger challenge is the structure behind it, the enterprise of customer service and fulfilling orders and tracking down advertisers and making sure they pay the bills and all of the other things that come with running, that kind of a business. So
who's all involved in the magazine? Are like you doing all the work? Because I think there's Dan and Steve, right? In addition to yourself? Yeah.
So there's Dan and Steve and I are the 3 primary. I say that, but really we have a 4th person who's involved in the production as well. That's Christopher Haluski, who's a production designer by trade as well. He and Dan have similar kind of overlapping talents in the design department. So we have 2 people that do the beautification of the work. Steve and I do a lot of the writing and do really the kind of the back end of the business as well, fulfilling orders and doing all the ad sales and things like that. So 4 of us, and the occasional freelancer. We've hired out some of the writing and a fair amount of the photography to bring in a little difference in the voice and point of view and everything. So, and we can't be everywhere. That's probably the hardest thing as well is all of the different events and clubs and activities are going on. Yeah, it's a big country.
Indeed it is. Do you personally wrap them in plastic?
No, they come from the printer that way. But I will say, if you've ordered, if you've ordered a subscription or a single copy, I've probably put the label on it and sent it out myself. So the shipping department is my dining room table.
There we go. So, I like that.
Yep, it's a very very homespun operation.
You lick all the stamps then?
No, I buy them pre-stamped.
Okay.
Yeah, pre-glued.
It still turns out well. It's very nicely well done. It looks good. Certainly high quality photos, nice writing. So I commend you.
Well, we appreciate that, and honestly, the feedback, is what keeps us going because it seems to resonate with people. It's probably not a secret that doing a magazine for North American Land Rover owners is probably one of the more challenging publishing tasks in the business. It's a unique group of owners, very individualist, and like I was just saying, it's a big country, and each region kind of has its own interests and different terrain that dictate how the vehicles are used, and so it's tough to pull that together under one title and make it work for everybody. But hopefully, we're doing that.
And the interesting thing is, you talk about it being a big country, and in the different regions, the clubs all have a different flavor. But what I find interesting is that they're all, even though they're all different from each other, they're all also different from the typical owner climate in England.
It's interesting you say that because that's essentially the thesis of next column that's coming out for the next issue, for the winter issue. I talk about how the clubs are different here, and even within. I'll give you a little tip off here. You look at BMW, Porsche, Audi, all these other premium European brands, and they all have fairly strong national clubs, and that's not something that you get with Land Rover. And I think that's largely a factor of the vehicles appeal to more individualist kind of owners, I think. So, within the Land Rover clubs, there's not this overarching kind of paternalistic organization that you get with other European brands, BMW and Audi and so on.
Or Land Rover's sister division, Jag, with JCNA.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a very different owner group for some reason. Yeah, there's some challenges there, but throughout the country, there are active clubs and local terrain and geography really dictates how those clubs interact with each other. And so there's a lot of diversity in how the clubs operate, but there's not there's not a nucleus around this owner group. And I think in some way that's what we were shooting for, is to at least be a central point of focus and Not that we wanted to head up a club or anything, at least be a nucleus for the American Land Rover community. Yeah, you'll see more of that thought in the next issue. Actually, in my column, it's been on my mind for a while, and I just came back from a bunch of, the fall's pretty busy with club events, and I got back and was thinking about how different the Land Rover club scene is here compared to other parts of the world where you have more kind of nationalized, large groups, and then also how it differs from other car clubs here in the States even. So
how do other car clubs compare to what Land Rover as a company does with the clubs? Like, does Mercedes sponsor things or encourage them, as an example? Like, because Land Rover usually does that, though, at the dealership level. I'm wondering if there's any national level.
I would say probably the best example of manufacturer-supported clubs probably comes down to BMW and Porsche. Those two brands understand that the enthusiasts really are sales aids. They're not, they don't look at enthusiast as a four-letter word, which a lot of car manufacturers really kind of look down on their enthusiasts. They assume that they're always going to be there, they're always going to be loyal, and that's just not the case these days. You have to foster that loyalty. BMW and Porsche both do that really well. Mercedes, to a degree, as well through their clubs. They give them national support. Those big organizations take some money to run and to do things like just communicating well with the owners. So they're really supportive of that. Land Rover's a different kind of company. Right now, they're more interested, I feel like, in bringing new people into the brand because they need that growth. And I think the enthusiast scene is regarded differently than some other enthusiast brands. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and I won't add to it, but I can see what you're saying, definitely.
Well, that definitely seems to be the case, not just in Indeed, like say from the corporate level, but in the vehicles themselves. I mean, the vehicles have certainly completely changed in, say, the last 5-10 years in their looks and in, yes, they say the capabilities there, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way with me. Not that I've ever owned one to know that. With the additional electronics and the removing of the driver from the controls, at least is the way I see it, that corporate culture seems to be changing as to how they perceive and what the vehicle does. There's always the stats, of course, about how many actually go off-road, and that seems to be getting, I would say, less and less with the newer models. So it seems like the Land Rover, the company itself, probably doesn't want to encourage off-road use.
The interesting part of that conversation, though, is it's probably easier than ever to get in a stock vehicle and get out and do something. It doesn't require the same level of technical expertise to get somewhere in a new Land Rover. I know they do it through the through the Land Rover Experience Centers and through some of their special trips, like the Peru adventure they just did, reinforcing that. But the actually encouraging it from the owner base in their own vehicles seems to be maybe a little different animal, a little less interested in that maybe. But
well, also when you look at the older vehicles, there's look at Discoveries. There's ones that they probably. They changed the name here in North America for a reason to be the LR3 and the LR4. Maybe it's a situation where they want to not talk about something that they don't particularly want to support or looks favorably on them as a company now.
On the other hand, you could say that Land Rover as a company supports the enthusiast market better in the sense that they still produce the parts for the really old stuff that the other corporations are not doing.
That is true.
Yeah. So what other challenges did you experience in the magazine? We'll switch back to that topic. That was a good conversation.
Yeah. So like I said, I think the magazine building part of it's fairly easy. I mean, it takes us a fair amount of time to find vehicles and really, quite frankly, just to make sure we spread the content out over a variety of interests and throughout the country. I mean, we're in danger. We're in the Northeast. All of us are here in, Philadelphia or New York area. So we run the risk of being heavily East Coast focused. So we really try to make sure not only that we get content from other parts of the country, but that we're out there doing stuff with the clubs and being in person with these vehicles and these people as much as we can to make sure we're not skewing it too heavily in one direction. So, that's meant I just came back from Arizona's fall rally, the Arizona Land Rover Owners Organization. We've been up and down the East Coast a lot in the fall here, but it's a matter of getting out and seeing what everyone's doing and really enjoying the vehicles in other parts of the country outside of our own area.
Has anything surprised you when you've gone to events or seen what folks are doing? Like, I don't know. I have no idea, but maybe a thought would be, like, hey, the Evoque is, or Evoque. I always get that. Yeah, there you go. There's your big surprise. I can't say the name of that car. But like maybe that vehicle is really well regarded or is very good off road or something. I mean, has anything like that surprised you?
I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, there's certainly differences in vehicles when you show up at club. I would say the one thing that kind of blew me away with the Arizona club was did 3 days of 10 different fairly intense trails out in the desert, and I don't think they had a single breakdown. It was a group of people that seems to really take care of their trucks. That was impressive. No, I think some of the clubs are more social. And some are really serious about the driving, and I think that just comes down to what's available to drive, and maybe some club history, who's able to lead and things like that.
Do you have a favorite story from the first 4 issues?
Oh,
or any one that you're particularly proud of that you'd like to holds up as this is the one to read?
Well, we feel like they all get better. I mean, we've had a couple of technical glitches for sure, and a lot of that's the fact that we work separately.
Welcome to podcasting.
Yeah, Steve and I curate and gather the content and hand it off to the designers, and that last part is always under deadline. There's never enough time for that. So we've made some errors and simple things. You put you copy and paste and paste twice or something, and by the time we've gotten to that point, we've all looked at this 15 times and couldn't tell the difference. It could be written in Chinese, and we'd probably still gloss over it at that point.
Right.
I think each issue has gotten better, and we're happy with our progress in building a better magazine each issue. Surprises, I don't know. I mean, we've seen so many amazing vehicles. I'm sitting here looking at a picture of the Series 2 that was in, I believe, our spring issue last year. Bob Raffensperger's Series 2 that's kitted out. We've heard so many amazing stories too. I mean, the places these vehicles have gone, it really reinforces that these vehicles are special, and fairly unique people are really drawn to them. I haven't met too many ordinary Land Rover owners, if I'm being honest.
What define ordinary?
Is there such a thing?
Yeah.
Hey, there's a whole podcast dedicated to it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's several independent magazines and all that stuff.
Well, I don't think there's any such thing as an ordinary Land Rover. So
No, I would concur. They've all been interesting in one way or another, and some of the stories, some of the places these people have been and continue to go, and the faith they have in their vehicles is just incredible.
Well, I always say they're like snowflakes. No two are alike.
Yeah. Probably one of the most surprising things for us has been the number of people that say, I just subscribed. I don't even own one yet, but you guys make this look so cool. I know I'm going to have one someday. I'm still just figuring it out. And so we've had a lot of people that are lingering from the sides, fantasizing maybe still about what their first Land Rover is going to be.
That's a nice thing. That's good.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say this is probably the biggest surprise to me. I went to the Muddy Chef Challenge at the end of July. My wife and daughter came with me, and as we do, we go out and we expect obviously to try to drum up a little business, find someone who's never heard of us. At that event, we had so many people that were subscribers, and they came up. I had people asking for replacement copies because their wife had thrown one out, and things like that. Actually, I had a wife come up to me and say,
"That's a divorcing offense, is it not?"
Yeah, I had one lady came up and said, "I need the winter issue, the first issue, if you still have one. My husband's going to kill me. I threw it away by accident," and he told me, "This is not a magazine we throw away." it was really neat to hear from all these people that actually, I would say the bulk of the people that we talked to there had already gotten it either through Atlantic British or subscribers already and really enjoyed it. So we had a lot of great conversations. What came up at least 3 times that I recall, 3 distinct conversations with different people, the same phrase came up, said, "You guys are like the National Geographic for Land Rover owners," which I'll take that as a compliment in terms of style and our presentation. But
I was thinking Life magazine, but yeah.
Yeah, no fewer than 3 people I spoke to that weekend said the exact same thing. It's like National Geographic, and I put it out on the table for everyone to see.
Well, I hope
that was really cool.
I hope that Dave that sent us a message about getting a new disco, because he looked at National Geographic. He better be a subscriber now if he isn't already.
Yeah,
that's right. Because now he has something new to use as a reference.
That's right.
Really not so much a magazine as a periodical coffee table book.
And that's kind of what we intended. We invested in the heavy paper and the presentation and the visual style so that the content would linger. I mean, we do a new vehicle feature in each one to keep everyone current, but really the content that's in there should be timeless. It's the kind of stuff you come back and want to read again or revisit.
As is the Land Rover itself.
Well, the vehicle
timeless.
itself is timeless, so why shouldn't the product, the periodical book?
Exactly. And I think that's why the quarterly pace works for us. If we had to produce work every 6 months or every month, I think it would get stale quicker. It's one of the critiques we had of the British magazines is that, it seems like you see a lot of the same stuff over and over again. And so we have more time to dig hopefully for more interesting stories and to tell the deeper side of it, hopefully.
Well, it definitely shows. Can you give us a preview of what's coming up in the next year?
We're working on our winter issue now. It's going to be pretty much like what we've done. We're working on a couple of new story styles. We'd like to introduce some sporting content. I hesitate to call it lifestyle features, but some things that involve hunting, fishing, boating, things like that with the vehicles in there. We're working up the formula, how we're going to present that, because we want it to feel authentic. We aren't trying to shove off a foofy kind of lifestyle piece. We want it to be something that resonates with the people that own these vehicles. But that's one thing. We've also talked about bringing in some military content. We haven't done a military feature yet. And, as we talk to people, even though the U.S. military didn't really use Land Rovers, enough people have personal imports.
The military did use them in offshore, in other theaters. Just not here on this continent.
Well, they did some training.
Exactly.
They did use them in some training, because I had a friend who was a ranger.
Did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, a little bit, but yeah, they did use them a fair amount in the Middle East and in Afghanistan.
And I believe
exactly.
I think Dan Cole of the 4x4 podcast has experience with Defenders. I think when he was in Australia, if you haven't talked to him, he might be a.
Yeah, we've had a line on several military, mostly Defenders, obviously at this point. But there's a local guy with a super clean Series 3 lightweight that's feature worthy. It was a Dutch Army. I don't think it's got 5,000 miles on it, but we want to tap into those as well, because there's some interesting stories there for sure.
What's his name? DJ is originally from Pittsburgh, has a lightweight, and he now lives in the Boston area.
There's a fair number of them.
Yeah. Not to mention Tim Smith, who hammers his mercilessly off-road quite a bit, but it comes back.
Absolutely. We're looking at introducing a couple new feature styles or story types. Yeah, we've got some other special stuff that I don't want to blow it yet because it's too early. But we've got a special feature we're building. Probably won't be for spring, but hopefully for summer we'll have that ready. That should resonate pretty well with everyone.
You're doing something piece. And you're doing something interesting this week.
Yeah, so this week I'll be heading out to Los Angeles for the auto show, which is, as auto shows go, it's not normally a terribly big one, but it has become more important for alternative transportation, alternative fuels and stuff. So I'm going to get a chance to drive the plug-in hybrid Range Rover Sport that'll be out as a 2019 model later in 2018. And then they're also going to be previewing the Discovery SVX. So I'll get an in-person look at that. I was not in Frankfurt for the reveal back in the fall.
You need to find out why there's no front winch. Aren't they?
Yeah, I can tell you that.
Okay.
It came down to crash standards. They actually had a front winch mount developed for the accessories division. When we were on the launch event back in the spring, the recovery vehicles had front winch mounted or front bumper mounted winches. We asked about them, and they said, well, it was developed, so that they could do crash testing. It did involve rerouting some oil cooler lines, and I think from a production standpoint, it's not practical. However, I haven't heard whether they're going to bring that in as an accessory that for off-road use only, as the disclaimer always goes. There's things that the manufacturer has to adhere to that the aftermarket doesn't. And I think, it came down to crash standards. They wanted to keep that 5-star crash rating.
Yeah, you don't want to get rid of that once you've gotten.
No. And I think also the production volume, for those was going to be pretty low. Granted, the SBX is not going to be a high production model, presumably either.
No, but the R&D cost and the development cost associated with an accessory like that would be way too high for the volume you'd expect. Because not everybody with an SVX is going to want the winch. So
exactly.
And the SVX is already limited. So yeah.
Yep. And I know Lucky 8's already got a Discovery 5 with behind the bumper winch mount that as we speak. So the aftermarket will jump on that opportunity.
And you also have some interviews, I believe.
I do. Yeah. So for sure, I'll be meeting with Jerry McGovern. I've interviewed him before. We get along all right in person. I always get a different perspective on his demands or what's expected of him. We're going to be talking about design in general, Land Rover design, I should say.
If you're talking to Jerry, you don't have much choice.
Yeah, but we're not talking vehicle specific. I think I've got a line of questions that kind of speak to the current movement and.
Right. Well, that's Jerry's thing, is the big picture of design. I think so. That's
hopefully he'll play along nice on that. And I'm waiting to hear back on a couple of the other executives that are going to be there. I don't have a one or two other interviews lined up with engineering or marketing people. So
excellent.
We'll get a better sense of where things are going. Naturally everything's leading up to the new Defender, which will make its debut in 2018. They're going to be on point. I've learned a long time ago that you're not going to get them to speak about something. They've been pretty well coached on how to deflect on those questions. But hopefully we can read between the lines with some of the other discussions.
Well, they've certainly had plenty of practice deflecting questions about the new Defender.
Yeah, they get pretty defensive about it now too.
Is there a pun in there somewhere?
Yeah.
Well, why do they actually get defensive? I'm kind of curious. Is there
because they, among journalists, that's always ever since they announced they were going to cancel production on the Defender, and since the DC 100 concept, it's always what comes up. When you get a bunch of journalists together, what can you tell us about the new Defender?
Right. And
they'll speak when they're ready to speak. That's the one thing I've learned. They're not going to tell you anything or show you anything until they're ready for that to be public knowledge. So
basically they got burned by the DC 100. At least that's my take on it. I
think they learned a lot from that. And, they, at the time they said, no, this is just a styling exercise to gauge feedback. And I think,
they got it.
I think they got feedback.
Well, so they achieved their objective in that regard. They did get the feedback, but the problem is people tended to take that and say, "Oh, this is the new Defender. Oh no!" And it's like, no, it's just a styling exercise. Just relax, people.
I think it was. I think it was the new Defender, and I think they converted it to they got a bunch of crap because they were, by rights, what they should have done was end into 2016 when that model ended, and then the next one, would a Defender 2 would have started the very next year, but I think they got so much shit.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, styling exercises, they come out and they are potentially the next whatever, and then you see how it goes and that sort of thing. But I mean, it isn't necessarily set in stone.
You can look in recent history, though. The Range Stormer concept pretty well translated directly into the Range Rover Sport. Right. The LRX pretty much was a direct, Evoque, and then the Discovery concept from 2014 was almost nut and bolt the new Discovery. So reading between the lines there, you can assume that the DC 100 was probably what they intended to build, and probably wise to proceed based on some of the feedback. But But I agree. I think, what was that, 2008 when that was shown, I believe. It's a long road. Usually they would have had that ready,
yes,
presumably
right.
sooner.
Right. Well, in that regard, it was wise of them to release it before they got too much further into the process and find out that nobody's going to like it.
I'm told, kind of off the record from people that are more familiar. And even Jerry said this, publicly, that the capability is going to be there. It's going to be a Defender in terms of its functionality and its utility. So I'm encouraged by that. I think it's going to be a departure from what we're used to.
Well, we have no choice in that. I mean, they can't make them the same way. They can't make them exactly what they were.
Oh, I think we know. I think we know what it's going to look like. I really do.
We'll see.
It's going to have this large, what I call bulbous front end, and it'll taper in the back, although they maybe won't taper it as much in the back. Because I had this thought. I was related, but I guess unrelated to in some way. I saw Discovery Sport go by, and it just kind of dawned on me. I was like, it looks like every other car out here. There's nothing special. There's nothing iconic about it. As I could look at, a lot of the past Land Rovers had some sort of special look to them, and I realized that the Disco Sport was just, I don't know. It could have been a Dodge. What's the Dodge SUV?
The Durango?
Yeah. So that's my worry, is that I think and it's probably another reason why they've not shown anything about the new Defender is, of course it's going to be capable, but they say that about every Land Rover that's ever come out. The Velar, it's capable. The Evoque, it's capable. Of course the Defender's going to be capable.
Right. It has the same underpinnings of everything else. It's going to have the same capabilities, more or less.
Yes. And what does capability mean?
Yeah, it remains to be seen. Yeah, I mean, all the new stuff is quite capable. I mean, independent suspension and all the electronics, as long as it's all working, it works really, really well.
Absolutely.
It's a good set of tires, and you're really set to go. I look at the current Discovery. The base suspension is a coil spring suspension, which leads me to believe that that'll probably be the base suspension on a Defender, which, for someone who wants a simpler vehicle, will be a nice option. Obviously, I think most of them are probably going to be sold with a full air suspension like everything else. I'm intrigued to see how far down they're able to specification, to keep a very simple utility vehicle. I don't doubt that that'll be capable, or that'll be possible, in some markets. But I'm a little worried that the American market in particular, it's going to be viewed as a luxury toy, and
it's going to be
they're going to be optioned to death, and you won't be able to get a bare painted cargo area or anything like that. Who knows? Maybe
it's going to come
none of them
in.
Are going to get that.
It's going to come in SE and HSE trim levels in this country.
I think that's obvious. They do that with all the current models too, and every time.
That's why I say that. There is going to be no base Defender in this country, I don't think.
And every time they mention Land Rover, especially in the United States, it's always mentioned as a premium brand.
Yeah,
it's just that's the way it is. I actually have two questions, and maybe you want to ask them to Jerry or other people. I don't know. That's up to you. But how does Land Rover see the Defender do in China, since China is now the largest car market in the world, and you have to do business there? How did that inform the design or capability of said Defender, or was it oriented towards maybe the non-Chinese market? My second question: how much actual direct influence, I suppose, did McGovern have on the Defender itself? Because it seems to me he had a lot of. I think the Velar was probably his thing. Like, he probably did all the lines on it, but I don't think necessarily for the Disco 5 from the way I've read and seen things. I could be wrong, but these are the questions I have. So I'm wondering, did he just say, go off and do a Defender? Yeah, it kind of fits our concept. Or did he say, yeah, I like this line a lot, and this line needs to be changed here, or here's my sketch of it. You guys now make it, make the vision.
I'll ask that. I can tell you from discussions with other car manufacturers and designers over the years that pretty much the standard procedure these days within the design departments is that they have an internal design competition. They're given a brief. A lot of times the hard points are already decided, in terms of wheelbase and powertrain packages and things like that. So they're designing an envelope around a mechanical package. And then depending on the size of their design teams, it might be 3, 4, 5, 6 different individual designers, stylists on staff throwing forward a proposal. Usually it gets voted on. Jerry most likely has the final say. The board probably has input. Pretty standard way. I mean, Jerry gets the bad rap because he's the design chief, which means he gives his blessing to everything. But he's not spending his day, at the AutoCAD station sketching things out. He's a visionary guy. He's informing.
Yeah.
So
since he's out front, he takes the heat no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the job.
Well, of course it is.
But
how big
yeah,
is
the actual design, it'll be several people internally bringing forward, a design for any project. Sure. Chances are good. Someone on staff has that sense of history and understands what the new Defender has to be. There's always changing priorities. When I spoke to the designer of the Discovery 5 and asked about the departure from things like the vertical taillights and some of the other kind of signature elements, the Alpine glass kind of disappearing into the roof now and things like that. They said, yeah, we've done that for 4 generations. And, every once in a while you kind of need to shift things. You need to break the mold a little bit. So, we need to recognize the history, but we don't need to live in it with every detail. It's kind of a big idea thinking there. But I totally get where they're coming from, and especially as they're trying to appeal to more people. The Defender is their icon, though, so I don't think it's a vehicle you can mess with too badly and still convince people it's a Defender. So we'll see where this goes.
An icon too.
Yeah, let's hope that they don't mess with it too much. But I can see where how you say where they're coming from. I can agree with that. Or it seems to me that if you need to every now and then shake things up a little bit, how about changing those details to things that make you stand out, not make you blend into everybody else's product?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So how big is the Land Rover's design studio? Like do you know how many folks are in there? Is it like 6-person department?
I don't know. I mean, they have exterior stylists, they have interior stylists. They're separate teams. When I previewed the Discovery 5 a year and a half or so ago, they had us in the design center. It's it's a big office complex. It's not a studio in the way you think of it. There are clay studios and things like that, but it's really a big open office space. I don't know, from memory, maybe 30, 40 desks in there with different project stations. I don't know for sure what their design staff is, but it's significantly bigger than 6 people. But some specialize in exteriors, some specialize in interiors and other aspects of the vehicles.
Do they center around a model, or do they do it based on, as you were mentioning, exterior or interior transmission or engine or something, or is it you work on the Discovery, you work on the Defender?
No, I think it's a small enough team. They probably all work on everything. Once a design is signed off on, then they all go to work on bringing it to reality.
Well, and in terms of the mechanical stuff, the platform has so many commonalities that you'd be crazy to separate all that stuff out.
Yeah, so they know what they're working with, in that regard.
So what else are you working on for the next year of the magazine?
Well, right now we're, one of our biggest challenges, frankly, is being able to keep up with the various channels. Let's say, we haven't had time to do as much web content as we wanted to. We really hoped our website would be more about, with 4 issues a year, that there would be some more content for the web to kind of keep everyone informed and entertained in between issues. It's just so much work just putting the 4 issues out that we haven't been able to do that. So we've been discussing how we can accomplish that. It probably means bringing on another part-time hand to help with some of the online content. I mean, we'd like to be a full service publication. Even though our primary product is the print magazine, we never really envisioned that being the extent of our outlet. So we'd love to be doing more video stuff. I know Dan's always eager to do video stuff because he's got a lot of friends in that arena. It's just a matter of, it takes so much time to coordinate to do a really good video and how it fits into the overall picture of what we're doing. So, and the magazine comes first. People pay for that, and And, we have a print schedule to meet, and we're in Barnes and Noble now. They expect them to show up fairly regularly. So that's our primary thrust. But, we'd certainly like to round out the
I hear you with saying how much work it is to put it out just 4 times a year. We have a hard time, coming up with a monthly show here. People talk about doing a weekly podcast. Like, no. Yeah. We got plenty of work just once a month.
You have to set a pace that you can do the work at the quality you want to do it. Because we could probably do bi-monthly, but we'd be scrambling even harder to get that together. And at some point, the content's going to suffer.
Well, yeah, the quality of the product would suffer, and would the quality of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how much is a subscription, and how can people subscribe?
We do 4 issues a year at $30 per subscription. So it's normally a $10 cover price. So we do a 25% off for a 4-issue subscription. We also finally just started offering a 2-year subscription, which I believe runs $55. So it saves you another $5 off of doing two 1-year subscriptions. We have all that available at alloyandgrit.com, or link right in the top of the navigation there. It'll take you to quick links to our catalog. There's also a full link on that page on our store page to the Shopify store, which has a little more expanded descriptions and things like that. Yeah, so single copies are available. Back issues are available if you're just discovering it.
Or your wife threw it out mistakenly.
Or your wife threw it out, yeah. And then we've got some merchandise and things there too. That's another one of the things is like we got an email from someone saying, "Hey, any chance I could buy a hat from you guys?" Yeah, I suppose we should probably get around to doing that. But,
right, yeah.
So we've done that. We've got some hats and shirts and things like that, and stickers are always popular as well. So yeah, and going strong into year 2 here.
Now, are you also going to be continuing your distribution arrangement with Atlantic British?
No, that was a 1-year deal, and
okay.
So we did that to make sure we got the word out. We've been getting subscriptions from that. A lot of people have gotten used to getting them, through their parts orders. So now they'll discover this 4th issue that we just put out, the fall issue, was the last one that's being distributed through Atlantic British. At some point here, if they haven't subscribed, they'll feel the void. There won't be any new freebies in their box.
You've gotten them hooked. Now they have to pay.
Exactly. No, that's worked out, and that's worked out pretty well. Atlantic British has been a good partner in that regard. So definitely.
I guess we timed it well to have Bobeck on the show then.
Yeah.
Bryan, thanks for coming on the show and giving us the update on Alloy and Grit, the magazine. And I believe you have a special offer for listeners of the podcast.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to do a $10 off any new subscription or any from now until the end of the year. You just have to enter the coupon code Centresteer, spelled the proper way, I'm told.
The podcast way.
Yes,
as
the
it
podcast
should.
way.
As it should.
So yeah, it'll take $10 off either 1 or 2 year subscription, bringing that down to either $20 or $45.
Fantastic.
So that'll be available till the end of the year.
Excellent.
We appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Bryan. We appreciate that. That's nice for our listeners. And if you need a gift for the holiday season, that's a good opportunity. Get an Alloy and Grit subscription, get a little bit of discount, help out Alloy and Grit, great magazine, journal. No, it is magazine. I thought it was a journal. Sorry.
Yeah, we've used both.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
I believe the acronym would be NAIL-J.
Sure.
North American Independent Land Rover Journal, NAIL-J.
Yep.
He's changing the name. Yes.
I'll put that on my next business card.
There you go.
Thanks again, Bryan.
No problem. Thank you.
So following the break, our interview with the Landy children's book author, Veronica Lamond, then fellow Land Rover addict and blog editor for Atlantic British, Dave Bobeck. But that's not all. We also have James Demer of DemerBox. He's going to join us on the show. He created a rugged Bluetooth speaker. And if you are interested in a DemerBox yourself, we also have a second discount code this month. You can get $50 off a DemerBox, but you got to listen to the show for that one, just as you have to listen to the show for the discount on Alloy and Grit. So we will be back in just a moment with the rest of the show.
Look, there's Landy coming down the road. Look, there's Landy with his his happy load. Jack and Molly, lambs in the back. My, there they go up the bumpy track.
Welcome back to the Centresteer podcast. Now joining us all the way from Cornwall in the United Kingdom is Veronica Lamond. Veronica is the author of the Landy book series. Welcome, Veronica.
Hello, John. Good to be talking to you this evening. Well, it's evening here.
Yeah, you're 5 hours ahead from us. It's wonderful. We know you from the Landy book series, which is a series of children's books that feature a Land Rover. How did that happen? How did it come about? Of course, then eventually I ask you why Land Rover?
John, most of my life I'd wanted to write a children's book, but I was really busy bringing up my kids and supporting the family. And it's, as everyone knows, it's quite difficult to make a living out of art. So I did a lot of therapy work with children. I was working as an office manager in a medical center. And then when I was about 53, after my daughter got cancer and various other difficult things had happened, I thought, hey, maybe I won't be around much longer and I should really get on with what I need to do. So I decided I'd start working in the evenings on this book and all weekend. So then I had to kind of look around, see what I'd write about. And I really wanted to do a practical book for kids because there's a lot of lovely fantasy books out there. But I thought our young children the world is so wonderful as it is, and there's so much they can learn from it. So I was trying to think of a really practical story for them. And I was speaking one evening to a friend of mine who has 4 sons, and she said, why don't you write about Land Rovers? So I said, why Land Rovers? And she said, well, my boys absolutely love Land Rovers and there are no books about them. So I went home and I thought, well, I don't think I could really do that because I don't know much about Land Rovers, and I come from an all-girl family and I've got daughters, and so it's not really part of my world. But that evening, as I was thinking more about it, my mind was flooded with memories of growing up in South Africa and driving around in Land Rovers on the game parks and on farms, and really good memories. And I thought, hey, well, maybe I could do something with this. And as I drove around Cornwall over the next couple of weeks, I just saw Land Rovers doing all the practical work around here. The water board used them, the electricity board, the farmers, the fishermen, and all the builder lads. And I just thought, great, this is a good vehicle for what I want to do. So I had to then
They're doing important things.
Yeah, doing really important things. And, all the utility vehicles were Land Rovers. So my eyes were really opened to the possibilities then. So I needed to find out more about Land Rovers. So I walked up the hill to our local Land Rover garage and met a chap called Mick Moore who was really excited about my ideas. And he invited me over to have a chat. And as we were chatting, and I was trying to think about what sort of Land Rover, I thought I'd maybe write about a whole lot of different Land Rovers doing different work and how they interacted. And then he said, come out and see my little Land Rover in my backyard. And there was Landy, the little 1956 Series 1 green Land Rover. And I thought, yeah, that's it. So that's how I got started.
That's perfect. It's such an iconic vehicle, but you're absolutely right. It's really practical. Great
and
subject for
those were the Land Rovers I used to see when I was in Africa and that I drove around in the Series 1, Series 2. So they were right up my street, yeah.
Harold was referencing a famous Top Gear episode which centered on Land Rover because Richard Hammond's a big Land Rover fan, and he said they do important things for important people. So you hit the right marks there as you were talking about it. So that was we enjoyed that quote a lot.
Well, I think we find a way to slip that into every podcast if at all possible.
We do. South Africa. So friends of the show, Graham and Louisa Bell, and they're a family of 4 traveling the world in a Defender 130. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're from South Africa. So I make that connection. I don't know if you have or not, but they're traveling the world, and currently they're in Spain, France, Italy, somewhere. They actually just left the UK about 3 months ago.
Are they on Facebook?
Yes, they are. You look for A2A, which used to stand for Africa to. No, I don't know. Alaska.
They used to stand for Argentina to Alaska. Now it's Americas to Asia.
That's it.
Okay. And it could be America to Africa as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Could
be. Good.
Yeah. And so they're really cool people, but they're from South Africa, and they're writing a couple books on their travel experiences. So
book number 3 ships out this month, I think.
A Series 1 and is the focus of the book. And what kind of adventures does Landy get into?
Yeah, the first one is how the book going to start. And someone a farmer said to me, Veronica, have you seen in a field sort of at the back of the woods there's a old Land Rover in the brambles. So I took a walk along there and was hunting for this old Land Rover, but actually I couldn't find it. The farmer had already sold it. But it had apparently been there for about 30 years. Then, of course, I'd been imagining this Land Rover in the brambles. And then somebody else saw a Land Rover in the brambles. I thought, well, that's the way Landy's going to start his life. He starts life in the brambles, in the farm, because the farmer's got a new red pickup. And Landy's very sad because he doesn't work anymore. And so he's talking to the animals and remembering the old days when he was a really useful Land Rover on the farm. And then we have Jack coming along and seeing Landy, and the farmer gives it to him, which I don't think a farmer would do now.
This is the story of every single Land Rover, I guarantee you. They sit in some field, and then somebody goes, "Oh, that's a shame. I should get it back on the road." And then they rebuild it and get it back on the road.
Yeah, so that's
bring it out of retirement.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So it's a story all over the world. So I think everybody can relate to that. So Jack comes along and he does Landy up, and Landy goes to live with him, and then he thinks he can go back and work on the farm, but pickup's not going to have him back on the farm. So he goes home very sad. And luckily, Jack has got a really big garden. And so Jack says, we can start our own little farm here. And that's how the first book ends, that they're excited and making their plans. And then after I'd done the first book...
The first book is available on YouTube, right? You now have it as an audio
I've
version.
done a little animation and the Landy songs. So please look under my channel. It's called Landy and Friends. And there you will see my little animation of Landy, which was great fun to do.
Absolutely.
So after I'd done Landy, I thought, well, living here in Cornwall, we live right near the coast as well, and it would be good to give Landy a friend who lives on the coast. So then I drew pictures of my friend's Defender, 1999 Defender, and he became Fender. He lives on the beach with his owner, Dan, and they sort of do conservation work on the beach. So that gave me an opportunity to really illustrate a whole variety of landscapes and include all sorts of activities for children to read about. And the two Land Rovers start interacting in each other's books, which is such fun. Yeah.
Is there a Rangy in the future?
Well, a lot of people ask me that, but at the moment, I've got so many stories for these two Land Rovers. And I do want to do another one about a woman, a vet with a Land Rover. So I've got little stories in my head about her as well. And she does actually appear. Her name's Annie, and she actually already appears in the books as the vet at the seal sanctuary when Dan's saving the seal. And there's also a book called The Apple Harvest, and you'll see her sitting on her red Land Rover there. So she's going to come to the fore. And Dan's also quite interested in her as well.
How many books do you have now? Is there, 3?
I've got seven books.
I miscounted. Sorry, I did do research. I did look, so I miscounted. There's 7, and they're available from your website. You're also available, as we know, through Amazon, right?
They are, yeah. They're all available on my website, and if you buy from me, I will dedicate books. But it's probably cheaper for you there in the USA to get them from Amazon.
Probably, yeah. I think we were looking at the costs, and they were probably in the $15 range for a book here in the U.S. on Amazon.
And if you've looked at them in the past here in the U.S., they were quite a bit more expensive. So now they're much more affordable. Go out and buy a set.
And they
like vintage Land Rovers.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. It is just very much like Land Rovers themselves. That's true. If folks want to more directly help you, I guess you get more of a cut from your website than you would from...
I do, yeah. Right. Absolutely, because you pay a lot to distribute it.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
There you go. And do you know if they're available throughout the world? Because we have listeners in Australia.
I think they are, on Amazon or Fish Pond in Australia and New Zealand. So I think, you can get them in most places, yeah. What? But I'm self-published, so all the books are printed here in Cornwall, and every book that goes out into the world goes through my sitting room. I do all the packing and the boxing.
Right on.
Yeah, so it's very much a home industry.
Nice. Is it your full-time job now?
Well, no, I work 1 day a week still at the surgery, and otherwise, I'm here in my little studio.
That's good.
Painting and
so you do
all the admin work.
You do the illustrations and you write the stories?
I do the illustrations and I write the stories and I do all the publishing and all the marketing and everything.
Very impressive.
So I want to know, when is your life going to imitate your art? Because
well, I think if I had a Land Rover and I was very busy on a small holding and things, I wouldn't have time to sit here in the studio quietly painting. So a lot of people with Land Rovers and who are really outdoorsy people sort of say, I wish I'd come up with that idea. But I think the reality of it that is you've got to be happy in your own company and to be working quietly long hours if you're going to be an illustrator.
Okay, but the Landy is a great blank canvas. You could be painting upon it.
Yeah, this is true. One day I'll have a Land Rover.
I think it's it's really cool that you write these books, but it's kind of shameful that you don't actually have one.
It is shameful. It is shameful.
I mean, you've got all these books shipping through your front room. Why not deliver them in a vintage
Land
Landy?
Rover. That's true. One day I'll make the money to be able to afford
There's a value add right there. Veronica will personally deliver in an old Land Rover.
Yeah, she did already mention the difficulty of earning a living as an artist. So a Land Rover might not be the first
publishing
choice.
As well.
Only if you want to eat.
That's the luxury eating.
Yeah.
All right, what do you drive? We need to know what's your daily.
But I have got Landy pictures all plastered over it.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. But when I go to give talks at schools and things, they all expect me to turn up in a Land Rover, so it's a little bit disappointing.
Of course they do.
I am aware that I am letting people down.
The used car lot that you went to, is that car still available? Is that original one still available that you could borrow it? Is it on the road?
Sorry, where's that?
The one that you used that give you the inspiration for Landy, is that still around?
Landy, yeah, he lives just up the road. So he belongs to Mick. He probably lives about 5 miles away from where I live.
So there you go.
So sometimes when we go into schools, we take Landy in, and Mick has actually his face on him. So if you look on my website, you'll see real pictures of Landy. And yes, we do go to schools in Landy sometimes, and we see how many children we can fit in Landy and do all that, and we have great fun.
There you go.
Okay, right. We feel better now.
And when I'm going up to the big Great British Land Rover show next weekend, and we're going to take Landy up there. So people love to see Landy when I go to the big shows and things.
Yeah, good. You should, I went to Peterborough about 2 years ago now. And,
I was there last year with Landy.
Yeah. Oh, I missed you then. I must
have been there the year before. I was giving a talk there about Landy at the factory and the making of the book, which was great to do.
Oh, nice segue. So you did actually get to go to the factory and take a tour. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, so Landy at the factory is my 7th book and the last book I've done. Last year, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks before they stopped production of Defender, I was having dinner with the branding director of Jaguar Land Rover, who's been a great champion of mine. And he suggested I wrote a story about my little Landy visiting the Solihull factory before it closed. And my immediate reaction was, no, I'm just too busy, because I was doing 2 other books at that time, which I needed to get published. But by the time we got to dessert, I'd already thought of the whole story. And so I said, well, Lindsay, what about this, And he said, great. He said, now we need to get this book off the ground. So we had about 2 weeks for me to go into the factory and take the photographs. So the following weekend, they opened the factory for us on a Sunday. Now, Solihull is about a 5-hour drive from where I live. So we took Landy up on the trailer, and they opened the factory for us on the Sunday. And we took Landy off-roading on the off-roading track to take photographs, and it was snowing, and it was very exciting. And then they brought Huey 166, the first Land Rover ever made, down from the Gaydon Museum to meet Landy outside the building, which you'll see in the book. And we drove the 2 Land Rovers around the factory and went to all sorts of places where people don't usually go. And I mean, the guys, we were just having such fun. And then at about 7:30 the next morning, when all the workers came in on the Monday, I went in again and took pictures of them at work. So everybody in the book are the real people that were working in the factory just before it shut. So it's a little bit of Landy history. And I had to think, why would Landy go up to the factory? And luckily, Landy actually turned 60 last year. So in the book, I've written a little letter from Land Rover inviting him up to the factory. And I was just going to write sort of Land Rover at the top, but Jaguar Land Rover wanted me to put their proper letterhead there, and the operations director who's written the letter wanted his real signature there, and he's in the book. So that was really nice. So that was a huge support from them.
That's just I don't know how you cap that story. That's wonderful. That's just really cool. I have to
absolutely amazing.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's neat that they did that too. That's the kind of stuff Land Rover would do, though. They like the history, they like the heritage.
It was amazing going around the factory and the loyalty of the workers, and The kindness that they show people who wanted to perhaps do a little bit on their Land Rover as it was being made. There was a little boy there who was going to fit the steering wheel to his dad's Land Rover. It was an amazing factory. It was really quite an experience.
So you mentioned when we were prepping for the show that you're currently illustrating another book. Is that something that you're willing to talk about?
Yeah, because it's very exciting. I've always wanted to do a book about Fender going through Africa. So finally, because Landy's had his special book as the factory book. So now it's Fender's turn, and he's traveling from Cairo to Cape Town in 30 pages. So it's quite a challenge. And at the moment, I'm sort of in Malawi. Did you see the little pictures? I was holding them up there.
Exclusively for us, because this is an audio podcast.
But I find that it's really interesting. He's been through from Cairo, he's been to Ethiopia, he's been to Kenya, Tanzania, now he's in Malawi. And it's very funny because as I get closer to South Africa, I find I'm getting more and more excited about this book because I feel like I'm going home. I've got about 6 more pages to do, and then he's going to go down the Drakensberg Mountains into South Africa. So I'm really looking forward to getting there. And I'm hoping to publish this book early next spring.
So that'll be book number 8.
Very nice.
Yeah. But the other exciting thing is I've got a company. I don't know if any of you guys know a company called Exmoor Trim.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have their seats in my
Defender.
Defender.
Working together on forming. Well, they're going to form a new company called Landy and Friends, and we hope to bring out merchandising next year, little rucksacks and lunch tubs and all sorts of men's boxer shorts and all sorts of things. So
how about kids seats with illustrated pictures of Landy on the fabric?
That's a good idea. Thank you very much.
That is actually a good idea. Yeah.
Since they are in the seat business.
Yes.
That's true. No, that's true. I'll tell Julian about that. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So, yeah, all sorts of things we're planning to come out over the next 3 years. So I'm very excited about that. So this year I've spent quite a lot of time, working on designing things.
How long does it take you to put a book together from beginning to end?
I would say to write the story doesn't take me long because I think in images, so it's quite quick. And I usually just sit in bed one morning and just kind of write up the story. But as I'm painting, I'm editing the story all the time because, I'm painting something and then so I don't need to write about it. So the two work hand in hand the whole way through. But it probably, getting the reference pictures and working out the angles and all that takes a while. But I suppose probably about 4 or 5 months and then a couple of months to do the publishing. And I work very closely with the printers. I go down there and format the book with a chap called Mark. And then when we're printing, I'm actually in the print room checking all the colors and, watching all the sheets as they're coming out. And so it's very much a hands-on project.
So you start with the pictures and then fill in with the words?
When I'm thinking, I think in images. I think of images that I want to see in the book. And I often talk to people and say, what sort of images would you like to see? And often they are exactly the images I'm thinking of. I've just recently been speaking to a chap in South Africa and saying, what sort of images would you like to see in this African book? Because I don't want to disappoint people. And, it's very satisfying for people to see images that they would love to see in a particular book. So he sent me some photographs of his drives in Africa and they tally just with mine. So then I feel good. I'm on the right track. But I speak to, when I'm doing these books, I meet a lot of people and I go out and speak to people. And it was great once when I was doing the fishing book. I needed to have an image of a man Dan pulling up the crab lobster pot. There was a guy fixing my internet connection out by the front door, and I went up there and I said, "You don't know anything about fishing?" And he said, "Yes, I used to be a crab fisherman." So I dragged him into the sitting room and I got him posing, as if he was bringing up a crab pot. I meet all sorts of people and get into all sorts of funny situations when I'm doing my referencing for my books.
Are you familiar with Martin Port?
No.
We had him on the show. He rescued it's called the Trans-Africa truck. And there was a gentleman, Philip Kohler, who back in the 60s, I think, transversed Africa. He went from the west coast to the east coast, across the Sahara, in this Trans-Africa truck. He has some really cool photos. Martin Port does that might give you some possible inspiration. The really cool photo, they're on Flickr, I think, actually. I'll try to remember to connect you with them. They're a really cool photo, which has nothing to do with Africa, but this Trans-Africa truck is in front of Buckingham Palace covered in snow. Oh. I thought it was a kick-ass photo. It's just really, really, really cool photo.
Yeah.
Now, what medium are you illustrating in for these books?
Okay. I use rough watercolor paper and I paint in watercolor. And I don't know if you look at my illustrations, what you think I use, because a lot of people think I use pastel, but I don't. I use Crayola wax crayons, which I used when I was a child. And I find using crayons makes it like a loose style, but I can also get a lot of detail in there because the detail is really important for people who know their Land Rovers. I'll show you here, but I mean, your listeners won't be able to see, but that's my crayons, which every...
They're actual crayons.
So it's great when I go into schools because I say, have you all got watercolors here? And they say, yeah. And then I say, have you got wax crayons? Yes. I said, well, that's all I use, So it's easy for anybody. It's nothing esoteric about what I use. But it's using good rough watercolor paper that gives that sort of broken line to it.
Very nice. Yeah. It's great to have chosen, a practical medium as well as the practical vehicles and, keep everything very much related to reality.
Yeah, and very simple. When I started out, I noticed that a lot of books about vehicles, animated vehicles, are done in a flat color with hard edge, almost like a cartoon way of illustrating. And I just thought, no, I just don't want to be like that. I want to do something quite different, and I want to do hand-drawn and very warm, artistic illustrations, because I don't see why a vehicle book has to be the sort of cartoon-like. But of course, a lot of them are digitized now anyway. But I like to keep it very hand-drawn and realistic. So.
It definitely fits in with an old Land Rover theme.
It does, yeah.
It fits. It feels very comfortable.
I'm just thinking about the fact that I use wax crayons a lot to work on vintage Land Rovers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, drawing reference lines if I need to trim a piece or making something custom. A lot of times I use wax crayons for layout.
Oh, that's interesting.
That and Sharpies, but yeah.
Yeah, you can use it as wax resistant. So like if you look at some of my windscreens on Landy, you'll see sort of white marks on them. So what I'd do is I'd get the white wax crayon and scribble across the screen, and then I'd paint over it so you'd then get this wax resistance on it. And then sometimes I'll paint, and then I'll scribble on top with wax crayon.
Looks.
You can use it in different ways.
That windscreen looks just like my 109's windscreen because the canvas top will leak onto the windscreen and leave this film onto the windscreen. So it looks just like it. Yeah. The number plate on Landy, does that have any significance? UTT 739?
That is Landy's number plate. Yeah, it's actually people who know their number plates, they will know straight away that's a Devon land number plate. So Landy started life in a place called South Moulton, which is in North Devon, on a farm called Narracott Farm. And then he made his way to Cornwall and is owned now by Mick Moore, who he's an independent Land Rover engineer and has a Land Rover garage just up the road here. And he's my sort of main Land Rover advisor. So and the toolbox that Jack has when he's doing up Landy, that's Mick's toolbox. Because I say, Mick, what sort of Land Rover, what sort of toolbox would a man like to have if he's doing up? And he said, you've got to get those kind of tools. And I try and get it right and ask a lot of questions. And then, and also when I'm doing the book, he will, I'll do my storyboard, and then I know which angles Landy's got to be, and then I'll give Mick a ring, and we'll spend an afternoon putting Landy in all those positions for the photographs. So I will start off with a photographic reference of Landy, and then I'll build my picture around, and that's all usually imaginative. Sometimes I'll get people to pose for Jack and Dan, but sometimes I just make them up as well. Quite difficult keeping them looking the same all the time. So don't look too closely.
You made the Devon reference, and I'll just point out here, John may not remember this, but that's where we found your 109 when we bought it.
Oh, that's right. We did. My 109. Really? Yes, my 109 Series 3 came from Devon. That's right. They did. It was
sitting on a used car lot in Devon.
Yeah.
Where, do you know whereabouts in Devon?
It was.
Well, it's been 8 years, so no.
All right.
No, it's yet 9, 8, 9. Yeah, I could
8 and a bit.
I have it somewhere.
It was in 09.
Yeah, I could look it up. It was found it on eBay. Used what do they call that? The forecourt of the used car lot. Is that right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I have to.
It was September of 2009. 0909.
That's right. And it arrived in the United States on December 12th of 2009. Right.
From 0909 to 1212.
So future books, is Landy coming to America?
Well, it's difficult going.
That's a long drive.
It is. I mean, it was. Well, Fender's managed to get to Africa, and then he's got to ship it back. But there are ways, because a lot of Australian readers say, when's Landy coming to Australia as well? So, I have got ideas of how I could do an Australian-American book, Cousins of Jack or something, and he gets a letter from them, and somehow the story is told in America or Australia. But I would love to do a book in every country, to be honest with you.
You need to get Mick. You need to get Mick hooked on overlanding.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the big thing these days.
That would be good.
Because then literally Landy could come to the U.S.
He could, yeah. Well, let's make some money and maybe we can come.
There you go. Everybody buy her books.
That's
come
right.
on, everybody.
Absolutely.
Lots of them.
As you should, to support
one for the home, one for the office, one for the glove box, kids.
Mm-hmm. And for the kids too, because this is a good way to get kids hooked on Land Rovers, because they need some positive reinforcement in their life, and this would be a wonderful thing.
Well, I get emails from dads and granddads all over the world all the time, because they really bond with their kids on these books, and especially for dads who've got daughters. They don't want to read about pink princesses all the time. And I had one Australian dad saying how he had an old Landy in the yard, and his daughter was always getting cross with him because it was in the way of her being able to play in the garden and things, and he got her the Landy books, and now the Landy is the castle in the garden, and she plays on it all the time, and she's older now, and she's actually helping her dad fix Landy, the Landy up. So that's a really lovely bonding story, and I just get fantastic stories, from dads. And when I go to the shows, I often get big guys coming up to me and giving me a big hug and thanking me for having written the Landy books. And I say, well, I'm glad your children enjoy them. And they say, no, I haven't got any children. They're for me.
Kids aren't allowed to touch the books. Yeah, okay.
So I've probably sold about 20,000 books to adults, I would have.
Right on.
Sure. Good.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of girls learning the skills too, and so I think that there's an opportunity there for the dads and granddads to bond with the girls and
that's
teach
absolutely
them.
What's happening with the Landy books. It's extraordinary, and I hope to, because I have equal girl readers to boy readers, and so
good, excellent.
After my African book, I actually want to, because you'll notice there are some girls in the Landy books, and if you look in the Apple Harvest book, there's Annie sitting on the red Land Rover, and that's a book I want to do about Annie the vet and her Land Rover. So I'm hoping to do that after the African book.
And I think anything you can do to encourage the girls to learn that they can have the skills and they can work on them just like the boys can, and just because they're a girl doesn't mean they can't be as good or better than the boys at doing that job.
That's right. So Annie's going to actually, that book's going to be quite an important book for me to get out after I've done the African one.
Good.
She's going to be very practical.
Veronica, what is the website people go to check up on all your information?
My website is veronicalamond.com, and there you can see what I'm up to, where I'm going. It tells you a bit about the history of Landy. Children and adults also send their photographs in, and because there's a reader's photograph page there, so you can get on the site as well. And there's also a link there to the Landy animation. If you want to use any of, the little Landy song on the YouTube thing, if you want to use any of the little Landy song, the last verse or something, or I don't know, the music or anything, to kind of introduce me, you're very welcome. I recorded the song in a friend's garage just up the road here, and after I'd done the song, I thought there's something missing here, so then we decided to drive Landy to the garage and run his engine. Did you notice his engine running through the song?
No, I didn't catch that.
At the beginning of the song, we turned the engine on, and we had the microphone outside the garage, and his engine is the bass line to the song, and then you hear it turned off at the end.
And are you going to do more, or more going to get translated into the YouTube?
Hoping to do a Fender animation early next year. So I've written the song. And yes, I'm just getting the funding together to do that.
Perfect.
And I've also on the YouTube channel, there's also a little slideshow showing. It's called Creating Landy. I've just put it on, and it shows photographs of the storyboard of the book, and picture of Mick and me, and just my work desk and painting. So people might be interested to know that as well. So it's called Creating Landy.
And when does Landy and Friends debut?
Well, we hope by spring next year. And I've also got a Facebook page which is called Landy and Friends. You can check me out there as well.
I will have links to those on our on the show notes and on the webpage. So great.
I'm also on Instagram, but I'm not very good at keeping pictures up. But I'm there. Yeah, all under Landy and Friends.
Oh, good. Podcast has a Instagram very similar. I will be sure to connect it to. So if anybody's following us on Instagram, they can track you down there too. Well, Veronica, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. It was very kind of you, and the books are fantastic. I'm going to. I now know what I think Christmas gifts are going to be for my cousins this year. I think.
Great. Well, thank you very much for contacting me, and it's been great talking to you guys. And I wish you all a very happy Christmas. And I hope your readers enjoy the program. Your listeners, should I say. Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
All the best.
Look, there's Landy coming down the road. Look, there's Landy with his happy load. Jack and Molly is noisy in the back. Mama, moo moo, oink oink, up the bumpy track. Time to go to sleep. Landy is saying beep beep, beep beep, beep beep.
And now on the Centresteer podcast, our special guest is Dave Bobeck. Dave Bobeck is a longtime fellow Land Rover addict and is also the blog writer for AtlanticBritish.com. Welcome, Dave.
Howdy. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's fantastic. We've been looking forward to having you on the show for quite a while. I know you and I have met years ago, I think at either Demer or maybe an OVL, our birthday party. How did you get into Land Rovers?
I like to play outside, and I figured that having a 4x4 would increase my ability to enjoy the great outdoors. And I couldn't afford a new one. So, I was looking at old Land Cruisers. I was looking at International Scouts. And I had a friend that got into the Land Rovers, and he got one, and I helped him work on it, and so on and so forth. And I knew a guy in college also that had one, although I didn't know what it was. I didn't really know anything about it. But, yeah, I ended up getting on the Rover LRO email list that was around back in the day. That is still around, actually.
It is still around.
Oh, yeah.
And I found a truck up in Potsdam, New York, and I drove up there with a friend and picked it up for pretty short money and brought it home. And 3 months later, we had it spread apart in pieces on a friend's garage floor.
As you do.
Oh, yeah.
And
I got
what was that?
Enjoy the outdoors underneath the pile of parts.
What model was it?
Oh, it was a 72 Series 3 88 pastel green.
And you still have it?
No, it's living in North Carolina with a fellow by the name of Jacob Austin. And I don't know if every once in a while I see a post from him on Facebook that it's broken again. And
it's bringing him an outdoor enjoyment then.
It is. When he bought it, he said, "Thank you for helping me jumpstart my new lifestyle."
There you go.
Exact words.
You are an enabler.
So, yeah, that one went to a good home. They usually do.
What happened after that?
So I had acquired, because one is never enough, I had acquired a Series 2 109, which was a parts car that a friend of mine had used. When he got it, it was a station wagon. It was a 5-door. And he had it stripped down to basically just the firewall and front end with the full drivetrain and everything. And he sold that to me for $500, and then I had to go find all the parts and put it back together. So once that was running, I wasn't really using the 88 very much. I don't know. I guess I thought I needed the money, or I don't remember why I got rid of it. But
do you regret it? Do you wish you had it back?
Not really. It was a Series 3, and everybody knows that they're inferior to the metal dash vehicles. So it was, hey, I have a Defender, a 90, and I have the plushiest of the plush Range Rover Sport supercharged. So I'm,
Ooh, double R, double S. I enjoy those.
It's possibly too much fun.
Yeah, I think they're more fun to give Italian tune-ups to than to actually own.
I actually don't know what that is. What is an Italian tune-up?
Oh, my. An Italian tune-up is the best part of my job. Customer brings me a truck that they don't use enough, and you go out and you find an open stretch of road and you put your right foot firmly to you-know-where until the exhaust runs clear again.
Okay, yeah. And this actually works because once the engine seizes up, there is nothing coming out of it. It's clear as can be.
Yeah, well, there would be that. But well, you got to test them, make sure they still perform as designed. And part of that is giving them everything they ask for.
Fair enough.
You had several series trucks, and now you're running into, it looks like you have a daily, is a Range Rover Sport. And then what else do you have currently that's...
Well, I can run down a little bit of the history in between. I had the Series 2 109 and then got rid of the 88. And a friend of mine had gotten his hands on a 59 Series 2 88 that seemed like it was a really cool truck. And it was a friend of his had started rebuilding it and then gave up. And then Pete had it and he ended up selling it to me. And I thought I was going to put this thing together and make some money selling it because I from Peter, and it was almost completely rebuilt. Well, my estimation skills apparently needed some work, but I got the thing back together, and I drove it up for the OVLR birthday party in 2005 or 6 or something, and I was in it for more than it was worth, really, at that point. But I sold it to buy a 90 parts car that I was going to try to rebuild into a working vehicle, which never materialized because by the time I had all the parts, it was now legal to purchase and import a Defender 90 from the UK or anywhere else into the States. It was like 2000, late in 2008, I think, that I had it. So I found one on eBay UK it was a right-hand drive, 2.25 petrol 90 in marine blue, although we thought it was green because the pictures were terrible, as they always are for some reason in the UK, for 2,000 pounds of white. And
that's a good price.
I had less than $5,000 US into it when it arrived, not just arriving here in the States, but driving it around Washington, D.C. for less than $5,000. And it was quite nice. And I still have it. It now has a slightly different drivetrain and some other mild modifications. So there's that, the 90, which has been nicknamed Yamalo for some reason that I can't seem to recall. Which that's the dish. If anybody doesn't know, Yamalo is the thing you eat on Thanksgiving with the sweet potatoes and the marshmallows.
Oh, that was the yellow at one point, maybe, or kind of a mustardy color.
No, it was something to do with somebody. I said the word Yamalo in a sentence that was talking about something else, and somebody thought I was referring to the truck as Yamalo, and I just said, well, that's appropriate, so why don't we just call it Yamalo? And that's that. And then I've had a couple of different Range Rovers over the years, just Range Rover Classics. Some of them are gone. One of them is now up in Pennsylvania, getting rehabbed by a guy up outside of York, who's doing a wonderful job, although very, very slow. And I have the Sport. So it's the Sport and the Classic, the 90, the 109. Oh, and there's another Classic, which is currently at Ben Smith's place. That's basically the doppelganger for the one that's up in Pennsylvania. One's an 87, one's an 88. They're both the same color. I thought, hey, maybe I'll have some panels or something. And it's got the solid roof with no sunroof. So if anybody has a headliner for a solid roof Range Rover Classic, I'm looking for that headliner. Just spread the word through the podcast. Any podcast listeners out there have a headliner for me? Let me know.
Especially in North America, right? On the Eastern Coast.
Hopefully in North America.
I know we have a listener in Norway with several listeners in Australia.
A little less convenient.
It would be, because that would be bulky.
A little hard to put in a padded mailer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, once you cut them up to fit them in your luggage.
There's a good idea. You can reassemble it, right?
Yeah, take a lot of piano hinges, but you can probably do it.
So what's your daily driver?
That would be the Sport.
Okay.
Which we've nicknamed. I'm one of those people that just has to name vehicles, even if it's a little strained or a little forced. I still feel like it just has to happen. Like the pressure, there's always this pressure to. Anyway, so that one is called the Super Sofa.
There you go. Right on.
I think we know why, right? because it's plush and inside, I assume.
And it's still an SS name, so that works.
Right. Actually, the Range Rover in the one that's getting fixed up in Pennsylvania is Chewbacca, and that's because it makes this noise when you turn the steering wheel on a cold morning.
Oh, yeah.
It just, I'm not going to try to do a Wookiee impersonation on the podcast.
I know the noise, so that's good. I like it.
I don't know what that is. It's on this. I changed the power steering pump, and it still does it.
It's something in the design, because a lot of them do it.
Good to know.
I want you to do the noise, because I think that'd be a great post-podcast Easter egg. I think that'd be great. That'd be a nice little touch at the end.
It's kind of like hold on.
Does it do it more in reverse than forward?
No,
because I've seen some that do it more in reverse for some reason. I don't know what it is about reverse. It's just probably some sort of vibrational dynamic when you shift it into reverse that amplifies through the steering or something. I don't know what. It's weird, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know if because this is like trying to get out of a parking space. So
Okay,
I don't even have to be in gear.
Is it at low speed even, or is it at higher speeds? Does it happen?
No, not really. And once everything gets warmed up, it goes away. But you can hardly turn the wheel. It's like you don't have power steering. I think it's an air leak, but I don't really know.
Or an air pocket that's trapped.
Have they fixed that design, Harold? Is that still the case?
I don't know. Even the D2s made that noise, so it's if they fix it, it's been in the last decade.
Do you have any other vehicles besides Land Rovers, or have you had an interest in other makes?
All Land Rover at the moment.
Good for you.
Good man.
Thank you. My daily driver for years was a 1997 Mercedes-Benz C-Class that is still around. My nephews were driving it. They live nearby. We kind of had to restore it to get it through Maryland inspection, new brakes and bearings and all kinds of stuff. But
that stuff's readily available.
Yeah, it was pretty much dirt cheap, parts only. I did all the work.
They're built pretty well, so you won't have to do that work often.
I work a total of 3.5 miles from my house. So daily driving. I do actually drive, which is a little bit decadent and kind of expensive now that I'm driving something that gets, maybe 8 miles per gallon around town on a good day.
But you get there quickly.
And comfortably.
And, hence the super sofa.
In my rolling supercharged sofa.
Yes. Is there any other Land Rovers on the list that you would like to move into or acquire or add to the fleet?
That's a good question. So I have been watching Ben Smith and Dixon Kenner restore and rebuild their 80-inch Series 1s. And there's something about this Series 1, the flat sides, the just slightly more compact shape of it that's appealing to me. Although there's a lot of other issues with them that I don't think I would really.
But they bring an extra cool factor to the game.
They do, but the whole pedals through the floor arrangement and the mechanical clutch and there's other stuff there that I just don't really dig. And if I had one, it would end up being some kind of mutant hybrid with, Lord only knows what kind of engine in there. And
right, that's doable in mild resto mod. As long as you're not stuck to originality, they can be made easier.
Yeah.
Mine is using a lot of Series 3 mechanicals and has the hanging pedals with the power booster and all that stuff.
Okay. And what kind of drivetrain is in there?
240D. Benz diesel.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
Not that it runs at the moment. It's still a stalled project I bought from somebody else, but all the groundwork was laid in the correct direction, and I'm actually looking forward to getting that one going.
Were you putting a 200 TDI in there, or did you do a 200 TDI 109 a while back? I seem to recall.
I do a number of 200, done a number of 200 DIs, which is the non-turboed version of it. Had one in my meat wagon, and I've done one in John's 109 as well.
Okay, maybe that's the one. I seem to remember talking with you through Facebook about that or something. Cause
that's possible.
That's what I am currently doing or in the middle of doing with the 109. It's out in the backyard with the 200 TDI installed into it.
Doing the proper Defender 200 TDI?
I got a Disco 200 TDI for $400.
There you go.
I ended up finding a Defender turbo and manifolds off of eBay in the UK.
Okay.
Nice.
So you're running the Disco timing gears and timing set with the Defender manifolds?
Correct.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way to do it if you're gonna go that way, because the Defender timing set tends to hit the frame on the other side. So
Exactly.
So it's kind of the ideal in terms of frame clearance. Mind you, it's not that big of a frame mod to make the Disco stuff fit.
Right.
I've done it.
Well, on the 109, that turbo really just fouled the chassis big time because the chassis is taller on the 109.
Right, I know. I've been there. It's you cut a notch in the frame, but it's not a big notch because it's right next to the engine mount, and that's where your engine moves the least.
Got it. Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's not as scary as it scared me at first, and I was turned off to the idea for quite a while, and then I decided that, the frame on the meat wagon is no prince. It's been bastardized with new outriggers. All it is the original rails. So if I cut a rail, who cares? And so I went ahead and did it, and just didn't end up being a big notch.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, it's all in there. I'm at the point now where I need to wire it up and plumb it all in and
right. That's the stuff that takes the time. Getting the engine to bolt in is easy, but it's making it all function. That's the time.
I do hear a lot of people saying that the pulley is going to hit the diff or the diff housing is.
I run military chassis, and there's more distance between the axle and the frame, so I don't have that problem. So, you could just lift your front end a little bit and eliminate that problem.
I think that's probably what I'm going to do.
Extended spring hangers, or I don't know if you can get a spring with a taller arch, but it's a pretty easy problem to fix. I would think. Yeah,
I've already got the long shackles to throw on there, and hopefully that'll be enough, and maybe put the little bump stop spacer in there.
Right.
That thing has been sitting in a tent in my backyard since 2011 when I started the project in 2011, and that winter put the tent up, and really the work has been very sporadic.
I know how that goes.
Yep.
What else do you plan to do to that 109 besides the engine swap?
Well, it's got it already has the high ratio transfer box from in its previous form. I guess it had a Robert Davis style Mercruiser conversion.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
So you really needed that tall gearing on the Ashcroft high ratio box to get the most out of the engine. And that thing would do 90 miles an hour. It was really pretty amazing. And
my gripe is you effectively lose first gear when you do the high ratio. It's like starting out in second because everything is taller.
Yeah, it just meant that I was in low range sooner off.
Right, there you go.
The engine had the power to pull that first gear.
Okay.
The first one I put in actually didn't, and I ended up once in a while just, you're on a slight incline or steep incline, I guess, in high range, and the engine didn't have enough to pull first.
Right.
But the last one I put in with the, Robert's last cam grind and the cross flow head, that thing was, you'd scare yourself.
Right. The engine had enough bottom end that it wasn't a problem.
Oh yeah, none.
Right.
No problem whatsoever.
Good to know.
Yeah, it was nice. It had a whole set of other issues like blowing out all the coolant in the first 25 miles of a highway trip.
Oh, that'll make it exciting.
Yeah. So I tried for a couple of years, as time allowed, to figure out what was wrong with that engine, and it just never. You put the block tester kit on it, and it never showed any issues. It never showed any exhaust in the coolant or anything. And once it kind of burped itself, it was fine. But it was a big burp, and eventually, it would split radiators. And I tried changing the head. I had head gasket. I had stuff machined, and just finally, I'm not pulling this thing out and messing around with it anymore. And I got a TDI for $400. It's a beautiful thing. So
series, ranges, Defender. You haven't mentioned the D word. You've not owned a Disco?
Let's see. No.
Is there a reason for that?
There have been times where I've seen people driving in a Disco and wave at me in my series truck, trying with everything I've got to maintain 62 miles an hour. And the Disco drives by, and the people are honking and waving, and the thing is covered in dirt, and it just looks like hey, those people are doing what I thought I was going to be doing when I got a 4x4. But,
Yeah.
you know, it just never really had the appeal for some reason. I don't know if it's something about the design or the ubiquity of them. I don't know. It hasn't been a conscious.
You have owned multiple examples of the rangy classics, so in that sense, you kind of have already owned a disco.
You know, I don't really look at it that way. First of all, with the exception of first classic that I had, which was a 91, all of my Range Rovers predate the Discovery.
Right, but the Discovery was based on the rangy classic. That's why I say that. And
so it's more like the people that have Discoveries own a Range Rover.
okay, all right.
Sort of.
Yeah.
You know, then again, it's just not the same experience. Even if it's just, you know, like you've got a different word on the front, you know, and people look at it and they don't say, oh, he's got a Range Rover. Oh,
Well,
you know,
yeah, there is that stigma.
the panache of just showing up in a Range Rover. I don't know. I don't really care about all this stuff. I'm just kidding around. But
Well, it sounds like you've also had all of the headaches that there's no reason to get a disco to have the same headaches that you've already had through your series and Defenders and Range Rover Classics. Right?
Satisfied that need elsewhere.
there's just so many of them. Even the Range Rover, first of all, you know, the Disco one, I think, is actually a pretty excellent design in that sort of, you know, late 80s way that it is. And it's just, it hasn't been in the Louvre.
Really? I don't have any of the Land Rovers been in the Louvre?
The Range Rover has been in the Louvre.
I missed that one. Okay.
That's an interesting yardstick to use, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not like, okay, I'm not going to own a car because it hasn't been displayed in the Louvre Museum. It's just that, you know, the Range Rover Classic is an iconic design that just, it transcends time in a way that Disco just doesn't.
All right. I like it, though. We will only own vehicles that are displayed in major art museums. I like that notion.
Or at least are maybe worthy of it, although anything that's coming out of the current design shop there, I'm not so
well,
sure.
Don't get me started on that. We don't have enough time.
Yeah, I think we're mostly in the same boat there.
Yeah, my opinions are known on 6 continents. So.
Which leads us to, you actually were able to go to Sully Hall. You took a tour and we're actually got to check out electric Defenders. And that's the kind of the main thing we want to talk to you about on the show today.
And just briefly, that all happened well before the Defender line was even announced to be discontinued, correct?
Oh,
it was
no.
after the announcement, but before the discontinuation.
We were like in the last week of tours.
Oh, okay.
It was literally, I think the line was shut down at the end of January.
Sounds
and
about
we
right.
were there like January 20th or something. I don't remember the exact date.
Wow.
18th or 19th, maybe, if I'm struggling to remember that far back. But so the deal with that was that, you know, in our local Land Rover, it's not a club, but our little happy hour group that we have here, a lot of folks off of the Defender Source forum that have been having a happy hour since 2005 or so, maybe longer than that. And when I joined that forum, I got to know some of these guys. I already knew some of them. A couple of the guys and I decided that we needed to go do this tour before the factory closed. I mean, that was kind of like...
Right.
That's like the Land Rover owner's mecca, you know?
Right. Get it while you still can.
Right. You know, we went back and forth and trying to pin down people's schedules, and it just wasn't working out. And then Charles Galpin and myself decided that, well, we're just going to go, because if we don't, then that's it. We're not going to see it. So finances and everything aside, schedule the tour and find some tickets, and everything will fall into place, right? So I contacted the Land Rover Experience tour operators, and they said, well, there were like 3 open slots left, and they were all on different days. and they were single slots. So there was no way for Charles and I to do the tour together. I don't remember the exact order of everything, but I think I just bought 2 of them anyway, because we're just like, well, we'll just go 2 separate days. Who cares?
Yeah, I guess you can't just show up at the gate hoping somebody's going to be scalping one.
Well, apparently you can show up and see if there are any cancellations, because there were a number of people on our tour who had done that.
Okay.
Nevertheless, so I purchased those tickets, and then in talking on the telephone with the people at Solihull, it came out that if I wanted to do an experience, half-day off-road drive, that we could get the tour together, because they had those openings available. Like,
even better.
And it's like, oh my God, it was something like, I don't know, it was $500 for the day or something, or $500. It had to have been $500. Couldn't have been £500. Anyway,
I did
a lot of money.
Yeah, I did the half day. I think it was like $250. I think is what the half day was.
Okay, whatever it was, it was a lot. We scheduled it, and then in the interim between making those plans, leaving, Charles contacted the guy, I don't remember his name, at Gaydon, at the research side of things, who developed the electric Defender, because Charles is building an electric 109, coil-sprung 109 full electric. So he contacted this guy just to try to get some information about what they were doing. And I guess the guy's pretty open. He's got all this stuff on his LinkedIn page. His, when it says like what your job title is, his job title was free radical. So we're like, okay, this guy's pretty cool. He ended up, once it became, he became aware that Charles was coming to the UK, he invited us to come to Gaydon and see the electric Defender. All right, sounds great. So I think we did our tour. I can't remember now, but I'm pretty sure we did the tour of the factory first, and then the next day we were on to Gaydon. The original guy couldn't meet us because he was busy doing something else, and he sent his associate, who was, equally involved in the project and interested in what we were doing, and he took us off-roading on the proving grounds at Gaydon in the electric 110. They had, I think, 2 or 3 of them there, and he said that there were a total of 7 built, and that they were all still around in various places and being used for testing, and being used by, one of them was with some nonprofit or something. And as far as I know, they're still around, and I saw some article somewhere that, they were being sold off to some group that was going to use them for some higher purpose somewhere.
Do something important we did somewhere.
Yes, Land Rovers are always doing something important, wherever they are, isn't it?
Right, somewhere for someone.
In the literature or something, but
Richard Hammond.
Anyway,
were they all 110s, or I believe, because that's any 90s?
They were all 110 station wagons.
Now these were full electric, right? Not hybrids.
Not hybrid, full electric. You open the bonnet, and there's just a big black box of batteries.
They had a motor at each axle?
I don't think so. I don't know how they do the regen, but it's all driven through a big brushless motor that sits about where the engine, a little bit further back than where the engine would be, because you've got batteries in front of it. But it's just a big, huge motor, and they use electronics to sort of dial back the torque curve when you're first stepping on the gas. It's not gas, but you know what I mean.
The accelerator.
Because the
requesting torque is the term.
Yes, thank you. So the torque is so instantaneous that it would be kind of jarring to the occupants and to, I think unexpected. So they actually dial it back a little bit and kind of ramp it up. It's just forward and reverse. There's no gears. There's a low range and a high range, and forward and reverse.
So they probably just drive through a stock transfer case then, it sounds like.
It does. It goes directly through the LT230, And what's interesting, one of the things that I found most interesting about it, well, first of all, off-roading with the thing was an absolute delight. And the torque delivery, I mean, you could just stop in the middle of the hill and just start again and keep going. Whereas with
just holding it on the accelerator pedal.
You can do that. And actually, you could just slowly let off the pedal until you come to a stop and just hold it there. And if you keep letting off the pedal, you can ease it back down the hill that way. You don't even need to put it in reverse, because then it's just the wheels driving the motor in reverse, but the power going through the motor provides the resistance to barreling down backwards too.
Sort of engine braking then.
Basically, yeah. And you can hold it there, and you can do that for an hour, and it won't build up any. And apparently that's because it's a brushless motor.
Until you drain the batteries, it will do that.
Precisely, yes.
And then you'll barrel down the hill quite quickly.
Then you will be out of control. Yes.
And that's when your years of driving a clutch practice come into play.
Yes.
What was what's the recharge time on that vehicle? Did you know?
That I do not know.
Okay.
I think that they said the range was not great. The range was like 50 miles or something.
Oh, okay.
And,
it's probably not a big battery pack.
Yeah, for 50 miles.
Probably a lot of weight for the vehicle is a heavy vehicle. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're using batteries that are similar to the Nissan Leaf batteries. Charles Galpin would be an excellent person to get some more detail on what he's doing, because very similar to what those guys did.
Did he get a lot of ideas then from this trip to utilize here?
Did he?
Yeah. I mean, was that a good trip then to learn?
I think he basically came away from it feeling like it sort of made him more comfortable that he had already made the right decisions.
It validated his choices?
It validated, thank you, is the word I was looking for. And so, yeah, he had not bought batteries at that time, and I still don't know if he has. Apparently that's a major expense for him.
Yeah, I think you want to do that last.
Yeah.
I think you do, because you want to keep them as fresh as possible. You want to spend your money late and maximize your lifespan by not putting them into use until you have to.
Well, I also think batteries are not they mature very quickly these days, so that if you even waiting a year, you would probably get significant improvement in battery capability. So
or a lower price.
Right.
Yes, that too.
Sort of like waiting for the Leaf batteries to start hitting the salvage market. I think.
There you go.
Now, did you actually drive then? What these electric Defenders while you were there? Or
we got to drive them. Charles and I both drove them off road, and Robin was the name of the chap that took us around. He drove it as well, and we both drove it around the oval track. It tops out at like 65, 70. It's not a fast vehicle.
They don't go fast.
No,
it's a Land Rover.
It's quieter than a gas or diesel engine Land Rover, but it still makes significant noise just from the motor going underneath there. And
the LT230 is not a quiet box either.
Exactly. And then we also, for comparison, we drove a 2015, I think it was, Range Rover turbo diesel.
Right on.
Like the top of the line Range Rover, whatever that was.
Right.
And that thing, we took that around the track. We took that off-road. It's interesting how similar in feel they are, because you really just, with all the electronic controls and traction control and anti-stall and all of that, I guess they didn't have the anti-stall. It's more of a stick shift thing, but they all are just, they're so smooth over the rough terrain. And the difference between doing it in a Defender and doing it in a Range Rover is that you're actually comfortable in the Range Rover. And
you're comfortable in the Range Rover, and you're cool in the Defender.
Yeah.
So, Dave, what else did you do then for the rest of your trip while you were there?
Well, we drove a couple of the Range Rovers and Defenders, the standard non-electric ones, at Solihull on their off-road course, and got to compare the abilities of those vehicles in the rough stuff. and test out all the features, the anti-stall on the stick shift for the Defender, and just, the sort of cross-linking air suspension thing on the Range Rover is with the locking differentials and everything. It's just come so far, and those vehicles are so incredibly capable compared to the Defender. It's amazing.
Didn't you drive a Puma?
Yeah, it was a Puma, and again another turbo diesel Range Rover, and also Robin, who took us on the electric Defender tour at Gaydon, set us up with a group who were doing an RTV trial somewhere in the West Midlands near a place called Iron Bridge. And we went to watch that the following day or a couple of days later. And he wasn't there, but apparently he had been there in the electric Defender the last time they did it, and ran it through the course. And it was pretty incredible watching I've never been to an RTV event in the UK. I do enjoy doing them here, and so that was a lot of fun seeing them, how they do it there.
I would think an electric drivetrain would give you an unfair advantage in an event like that.
Yeah, I don't know if they were competing or just having fun with it, but it's there was one point during that competition where there was a guy, was driving a V8 110 station wagon, and he was just revving the snot out of it, trying to get up some hill. And I looked at the guy next to me and I said, I don't think I knew they could rev that high. And he just laughs and he says, yeah, neither did we. and you watch this go on for a day, and you think about what these people put the cars through, and then Americans buy these engines once they hit the junkyard. You really have to think, maybe that's not so smart.
How does you drove the Puma, how's it compare?
They're really, really, really nice. And I've driven one on the road here in the States. The power...
Ride in one.
Yeah.
Didn't get to drive it, yeah.
The power delivery is unlike anything else that they came out with, at least on the diesel end of things. And off-road, you still have, I guess they have traction control. I'm not really sure. They do have the anti-stall, which is a huge bonus, although I did manage to stall it.
I love it.
It is possible.
Well, anything is possible if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I guess so. I also had the thing about an inch away from a tree on a side slope. The tour guide basically explained to me what I was doing wrong, and he says, just if you point your wheels straight instead of trying to steer away from the tree, then we'll go straight and we won't hit the tree. And I'm just thinking well, I hope we don't hit the tree, because I'm not paying for this truck. If we do, it's going to take a big chunk out of the side. And I did what he told me, and it worked.
So all these adventures that you went on for this tour, is that available anywhere for people to get more information, learn about, see pictures?
Specifically of our trip, yeah. or just to do those types of things on their own?
Well, I assume your trip. Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have a blog or something that you had that you put all that information to? Because I mean, in addition to the fact you're also the blog writer for Atlantic British, but I thought maybe you might have something there, or do you have it another place?
I don't know if I have anything public on that trip other than the blog articles. We did do a blog. We did do an article about the tour and seeing the electric Defender. I may have gotten 2 articles out of that. And I didn't get any pictures at all at the RTV because my phone had died due to lint in the charger socket.
There you go. And, it's that European lint.
Yeah, stuff is thick.
What you get for wearing metal pants, right?
Right. And we also stopped at Richard's Chassis.
Right on.
Atlantic British gets all of their chassis through Richards, and I wanted to try to do something else work-related while I was there, something else Land Rover-related, and I knew that Richards was pretty liberal with giving people tours through the factory, and we met Alistair Banks, and he spent like 3 hours with us on a Saturday, and it was an absolute ball. It was really fun and really interesting. So there's an article about that. I can share the links to that stuff with you guys after if you want to.
Yes, please.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
If anybody's interested in the blog, that's easy. It's roverparts.com/news.
There you go. So how did you become the news blog writer for Atlantic British?
Actually, well, I've always enjoyed writing, and I've written a bunch of stuff for the various club newsletters over the years, and at least one article in one of the magazines. Fairly good friends with Eric Whiston, and he mentioned to me that they were looking for somebody to take over the blog, and I raised my hand and said, I'll give that a shot. And I interviewed with Chris and shared some of my previous work with him, and they were willing to give me a shot at it. So,
yeah,
not really a secret, but I do have a number of people who will contribute material. Ben and Dixon that frequent the maritime events that I can never seem to make it to.
Right.
And I actually missed Winter Romp this year, so I think Dixon provided me with the material for that. And Guy Fawkes, I just did an article last week about Guy Fawkes,
right.
Which basically, and also that really started. It never occurred to me to ask people to contribute in that way. But one of the things that we did with Eric when he went out to Moab a couple years ago, that he was sending missives from the road and pictures, and we would edit it and did a kind of Atlantic British on the road series.
I do remember that one.
Yeah, that was cool.
We sought to continue doing that, and he went to Guy Fawkes, and we were supposed to do one, but he broke his finger or something, so he was only there for a couple hours.
Ouch.
That'd be a short article.
And how often do you guys plan to come out with articles for AB? Is there a regular schedule?
Oh, yeah. It's 3 articles every other week.
And where can people find those articles? That's also riverparts.com/news?
Yep. That'll take you right to the top, most recent article.
Yeah, or you can subscribe, I think, to the email, right?
You can subscribe to the email. I cannot tell you how to do that because I don't know how to do that. Other than
I did it years ago, so I don't remember either.
Yeah,
so.
I'm on their list, however, and so
I'm sure
it comes.
I'm sure if you go to roversparts.com, and we should do research again. I'm sure that information's there. If not, I'll try to have a link.
Actually, if you buy product from them and give them your email when you buy, you're on their list.
I believe that's
probably how
correct.
that happened. Yes,
and also. Have they done 4 issues now of Alloy and Grit? Are you guys aware?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're on they just did their 4th.
Okay. So the 4th one is out?
Yes. Yes, I
think
believe it is.
so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I just had to re-up for my subscription. What you don't know, Dave, is that people on the podcast have already heard from Bryan from Alloy and Grit because we're recording our interview with you before we talk to Bryan for Alloy and Grit. I think we all subscribe to Alloy and Grit.
I figured as much.
So what's coming up? Any interesting stuff you can preview for us? What's coming up in the blog post? Anything interesting you're working on?
In the blogs, well, we're hoping to review the iLand diagnostic computer. We're not hoping to review. We intend to review the iLand diagnostic widget, which they've sent me one, and I've had it now actually for a couple months, and they're kind of bugging me to get the piece done. But the problem that I'm having is the car isn't broken, so I don't really need to use the diagnostic thing.
You need a disco, Dave. You need a disco.
You'll have plenty to diagnose on a disco.
Yes. See,
you just
already programmed to the Range Rover Sport, so I don't think I'm going to switch over.
True. You just don't have enough ODB2 vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah. There is supposedly it works on the Classic. Maybe once I get that back, I can switch it.
Yeah, I wonder if the 95 year.
The 95 does have an OBD2 port.
Yeah, because that's close enough.
Even though it's not running the full OBD2 suite of diagnostics, it has the port, so you can interface.
Yeah,
I think you can get an adapter or something to run it with the earlier,
just regular ODB1.
No, what do they call that system on the old classics and Discos and Defenders before they went OBD2? There's
the 14 Cox.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It uses this funny 3-pin round connector for that.
Was that before?
It's been a while since I've done one. So
was that before they standardized on ODB?
Yeah, it would have been. I don't know if that CUX, if that started with Rover, or was that Harold? Do you know? Is that a?
Well, that was a Lucas product, and it was popularized by Rover, but I think a lot of companies used it. Certainly anybody had used the Rover V8, which was most everybody, but I think it was used on some other products too. And there was a 13 CU, and then the 14, and I don't know what the difference is. And then CU became CUX, and these are just all iterations of the product. And
right.
I don't know what the difference is, but.
Still better than most other manufacturers in that era who were not doing anything remotely standardized in that way. Most were still just blinking LEDs.
Yeah, and for all the flack that system gets, I find it actually works pretty well. Little issues that are sort of common and like, okay, yeah, it's probably the stepper motor.
Yeah, which actually is the General Motors part. They're pretty easy to find, but working on them isn't bad, and they're pretty simple, and they do work well when they're working. It's just diagnosing them can be a little bit of a chore sometimes. And, of course, you're only working with the fuel injection. The ignition is still a standard distributor, which is pretty easy to understand for most old-school people.
Yep, just change everything until it works.
And there you go.
Dave, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences in the Land Rover community and contributing also to the community by being the blog writer for Atlantic British. Hope you got everything out that you wanted to talk about, at least for now. We'll probably have to have you back on the show, though.
Oh, good Lord, no. We barely even scratched the surface. I could go on for another 2 hours.
I suspect.
At least. And especially if we get another glass of whiskey going, then, we'll have to have a campfire and
there you go.
That is the inspiration, Dave, for the podcast, is to sit around a campfire and talk about Rovers. And so that's exactly what we've just done. I appreciate that.
Yeah. You guys are keen on those?
Oh, very.
Harold's the whiskey guy more than I am.
Oh, yeah. I have a memory, and I think it was you, Dave, but I'm not absolutely certain, but sitting around a campfire at a MAR event having some whiskey, and you were entertaining us with a story about a last-minute trip to England, and you were driving a 130 in a snowstorm.
That was the previous trip to the UK.
But that's going to be on the next podcast. The next time you come on the show, we're not doing that story now.
There you go. No,
that's a teaser for the next time.
But I do remember there was a campfire, and I had my mortar tube full of whiskey, and we were having a nice time telling stories.
The only time I've ever seen Harold lit up. That was the only.
No, not the only time.
Oh, okay.
There was the MAR with the commercial whiskey tasting.
Yes,
you got me on film for that. That was a different MAR.
Oh, okay. Get mixing up my.
That was on somebody else's whiskey. I was lit up.
Yes, you were.
There was some moonshine at that one too. That was fun.
Oh yeah.
Thanks again, Dave, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We'll have you on soon.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
And now on the Centresteer podcast, a special guest is James Demer of the DemerBox. I heard about this thanks to Martin Port in the UK, who you may recall has the Trans-Africa truck that Philip Kohler drove across Africa back in the 60s. And I saw he had one of these, looked it up on the internet, and found the box. It's really cool. It's a Pelican case that is Bluetooth with speakers in it, storage inside of it, and it's made in America, which is cool. And so James is nice enough to join us and talk about the DemerBox. Welcome, James.
Oh, thanks for having me, John. I'm really excited and honored to be here on Centresteer.
You're quite welcome. And although we're a little upset with you because you're sitting in a Glendenwagen talking to us.
Yeah, it's my coworker. Well, it's a funny story, but the guy who essentially owns part of DemerBox has this G-Wagon sitting in his warehouse, and it's the quietest place for me to sit. So here I am.
That says something. Yeah, I know. So tell us about the DemerBox.
It would definitely be quieter than sitting in a Land Rover, that's for sure.
That's true. Yeah. Only if it was turned off, though. If the Land Rover was off, then yeah.
Well, yes, but yeah.
So tell us about the DemerBox. How it came about?
Sure. Well, DemerBox is essentially an indestructible, waterproof Bluetooth boombox that has 50-hour battery life. You can charge your devices from it with its built-in USB power out. It has dry internal storage. I invented it because for the last 20 years, I was a location audio mixer for different TV shows like Survivor, and I worked with Bear Grylls, and gosh, I've done a whole host of shows. I was working on a feature film in Barrow, Alaska. I needed a playback device to use outside for a scene we were filming, and so I took an old Pelican case, cut some holes in it through an audio circuit that I built inside and a battery, and the first DemerBox was born. So you see it's got a giant hole in the box, and you say, well, how can anything with that giant hole be waterproof? And in fact, it isn't totally waterproof until you plug that hole. The hole is actually called a base port, and it's what gives the DemerBox its tremendous low end. It's got a lot of bass, a really punchy, tight bass sound. But there's a plug that lives on the inside, so you open the lid. If you want it to be totally waterproof, you open the lid, you pull out the port plug, and you insert it in the base port hole, and then you can throw it in the water, and it's fully waterproof at that point.
As long as you remember to insert the weighting plug.
Correct. Yep. You have to remember to insert the plug, which, in all fairness, if you were, doing a party trick for your friends and you forgot, then that could be a problem. Once you've used the box a few times, it's pretty easy to remember.
Okay.
And we encourage people to put the plug in if they're, around water where the box might get submerged. But if it's a rainstorm or something like that, a lot of times we don't even bother putting the plug in.
And how loud can it get?
It's loud enough for a karaoke party in your living room. I know Martin Port said it's loud enough over the sound of his engine in his Land Rover. It's pretty loud. It's not loud enough for 100 people, but it's loud enough for 10 or 15 people.
Well, if it's loud enough to be heard over a functioning Land Rover, I think that's what our listeners are concerned with.
That's exactly my question. Yes, yeah. I didn't get one yet, but I need to, and I will test it out in my Series 3.
Please test it out.
I'm going to have to check that out. Is it only? Can you only connect to it via Bluetooth, or can you also? Is there a hardwire to it?
It's Bluetooth and it's hardwired.
Okay.
There's a 3.5 millimeter auxiliary jack on the inside, so a standard. Right. One of those, stereo mini plug cables works, and it comes with one of those. You can plug your phone or your computer, into one end of that and plug the other end into your DemerBox, and voila, you bypass the Bluetooth.
Nice.
And what some people do, they'll hardwire their phone and leave it inside the box to protect their phone, or you can run the auxiliary cable out through the base port and then plug in your computer. So if you're camping or something, you can watch a movie from your laptop or your iPod and still be hardwired and use the DemerBox as your audio source.
Can you put the phone inside, charge it, and charge the phone, and then also play at the same time?
Sure can. Yeah, definitely.
That's good.
Is there room inside the box to put your whole laptop in there?
No, you can fit an iPad mini. You can fit about, I think, 4 cans of soda. When I travel, I stuff usually my T-shirts and socks inside the DemerBox, and you can fit a fair bit of soft goods inside there because you can squish them up against the lid.
Okay.
Kind of depends on what shape the thing is, but you can put it holds a surprising amount of stuff on the inside. A lot of times, I'll find people will throw their wallet and their keys in there, or, maybe a sandwich and a soda or something, and use it as sort of a lunchbox. It's a lot of versatility. I'd say that's probably the one feature of our product that people don't realize how useful it is until they actually own a DemerBox and they start putting things inside it.
Right. I was thinking it'd be useful if you could put a laptop in it, because I would like, something ruggedized to hold all of my electronics in one place.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not that big.
Are there plans for a bigger one in the future?
Well, we do. I think probably the next iteration will be a smaller version, because we have a lot of people. We actually used to make a smaller version back before we did our Kickstarter. It was a single speaker model, and it was actually half the physical size of the current model that we make. A lot of people have been begging us to make that size again. So we've we completely redesigned and re-engineered that model, and hopefully we'll have that out sometime in early 2018. And then maybe we'll make a bigger one. I've made bigger prototypes, and it's a lot of fun. But part of the problem is, we're a little company, and tooling up injection molding to make inner parts that hold everything together gets quite expensive. So
sure it does.
How long does the take to charge the battery up? And how do you charge the batteries? I guess it's plugged in, obviously.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
It takes about 4 hours with the charger that it comes with. You plug your charger into the wall, and then you plug the other end of the charger into the charge port on your DemerBox, and it charges up. And once it is charged, it runs for. We did a contest last year. We put a DemerBox outside on Thanksgiving Day, and we played music for. Well, we had people guess how long it would play for. Before the battery died, and it went 50 hours and 37 minutes.
Right on.
And I
That's
think
impressive.
14 seconds. And that was at freezing temperature. And as you may or may not know, lithium-ion batteries are temperature sensitive.
Well, they all are to some extent.
It's true, yeah. I think
batteries are never at their finest in cold weather.
No, it's very true. Very true.
So what is the input voltage on the charging circuit?
It's
if you don't mind my getting technical.
12.6 volts.
So if we could rig up a hardwired charging cable to a vehicle and keep the battery charged that way.
Yeah, we actually sell, and it's not on our website yet, but by the time this podcast gets aired, it will be. We have a vehicle charger that plugs into an old cigarette lighter,
right,
and outputs 12.6 volts. It's made for the DemerBox, and it works great. In fact, that charger will accept up to 24 volts, and I've charged.
Excellent. That was my next question.
So you can use.
And Johnny knows why.
You can use your oddball 24 volt output and still be able to charge a DemerBox.
Actually, I don't think John has any 24 volt lighter sockets. All the lighter sockets are 12, so I think we're going to be okay either way. But.
Yeah, right.
Oh, good. Well, if you wanted to use a solar panel that outputs higher than 12 volts, that would work.
We talked about this before. You have a special offer for our podcast listeners. Can you tell us about that?
Sure do. Yeah, we're really excited that your listeners, are potentially interested in our product and hope that they go to the website www.DemerBox.com to check it out. And if they decide they want to buy one, they can use the discount code Centresteer. That's CENTRESTEER for $50 off, and that'll be good through the end of 2017.
Wonderful. Fantastic. And to do that, you have to go to the website, right? Because I know you're also available on Amazon. Make life easier for everybody. We're just going to do it from your website.
Yeah, if I can figure out how to make it work on Amazon, I will. You can do an addendum when this goes to air.
Any listeners that might be interested that are outside of the U.S. and Canada?
We do currently just ship to U.S. and Canada on our website, but I would definitely encourage any of your listeners to write to info@d.com and let them know that you heard the podcast and you're interested in a DemerBox and you're outside of the U.S. We'll figure something out for you guys. Definitely love to have you try out a DemerBox. Yeah. I'm sure we could make something work.
Yeah.
So you'll still honor the discount code for people outside the U.S.? They just have to write to you?
Yeah, write to us. Let us know. Probably what would happen is you'll have to pick up the shipping. Some countries it's more expensive than others, but if you're willing to pay the shipping, we're willing to still honor the discount code.
Cool.
Excellent.
And of course, the nature of Skype you cut out when you were saying the email address. I believe it's info@DemerBox.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. info@DemerBox, and Demer is DEMER.
It's a natural connection. I thought it was really cool. You got sound, you have Land Rovers, you have podcasts. So because I'd like to see is people sending their pictures in of listening to our podcast through the DemerBox in their truck. I think it's so cool.
Is the DemerBox available in different colors, like for instance olive green?
It is actually olive green, and it's become our best-selling color. It looks really good. And it certainly looks good with the old Rovers. I think it's probably either black or olive green tend to have that, it's a little bit more industrial, military, or old vehicle feel.
Which is exactly what we're looking for.
But some people like the bright orange because it pops and it's easy to see. You're not worried about losing it. So it kind of just depends on what you're into, I guess.
Easier to shoot at in the woods, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. In fact, we actually have sold. I just sold one recently to a guy who is going to use it for an animal call while he's hunting, and I thought that was kind of an application. He's got an app on his phone that has different, I guess, bird calls, and he's going to hide it in the woods and make the bird calls and hopefully attract something to shoot at.
That's actually
I think it's plan.
It's a smart idea, actually.
Speaking of shooting at, did I see on your website that you have a video where you're actually shooting at the DemerBox to try and destroy it?
Yeah, we did a fun video. So my business partner, Jason, and I, we both come from the film and TV world. And, we get wacky ideas once in a while. So we thought, let's make a durability video. We thought of all the crazy things we could do to a DemerBox, film it. So one of the things was tying a DemerBox to a bunch of balloons and floating it up in the air and then just shooting it down and seeing how it survived. We cut a hole in a frozen over pond and stuck the DemerBox inside the frozen water. We dragged it behind a sports car. We did just about every durability test. We beat it with a stick, a piñata stick, and we really just couldn't break the thing.
Place it upon a high rise that's being demolished.
You beat me to it, Harold.
Yeah, we've thrown it off, but from 15 feet onto a cement floor. And actually did break, the second time we did that, we broke one of the little fins, one of the little feet off the bottom of the Pelican case, which we glued back on, no problem. But the box itself remained waterproof, and it continued to play music and work just fine.
There you go. That's what matters.
So, it's not completely indestructible, but it's pretty darn hard to break.
So it's the Toyota
I would add that everything is fully rebuildable. We build them. We moved our shop from Portland, Maine to Peachtree City, Georgia, but everything is assembled by hand right here in Peachtree City. We use all stainless steel hardware. The case is a USA-made Pelican case. All the injection molded parts are made in Minnesota. It's put together with a lot of care and love.
Do you have any Land Rovers in your history?
No, I don't. I want one. I definitely want one. I've owned a lot of British cars in my history. I've owned a lot of cars. I've probably owned 50 cars in my lifetime.
That's a good start.
Starting with my first car was a 74 Toyota Corona, which I got rid of pretty quickly and replaced it with a Jet that I drove until I was about 17, and then I sold that and got a 63 VW Bug convertible and just kind of kept going from there with lots of wacky cars, most of which were, not the prettiest things, but they were cheap and fun to drive and fun to fix and fun to flip.
What do you mean? You mean like as in roll?
No. Fun to get bored with it, or someone would say, "Hey, I've got this '61 Jaguar. I'll trade you for that Fiat 500 or something." So that stuff happened all the time, which is a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Well, if you want a Rover, we know people we can hook you up if you ever get to that.
But we'll definitely have to talk. It's on my list. I guess the question is, do you go with the short wheelbase or the long wheelbase? I think that the shorter ones look cooler, but the longer ones seem infinitely more practical.
Yeah, they ride better, and you can haul more stuff in them and more people and that sort of thing. But the short ones are better on the trail. However, a good compromise is the 100-inch wheelbase of the Disco and the Rangy Classic. It's sort of halfway between, and it's sort of the best of both worlds. And you now being in Georgia, I know there is a pretty serious infestation of Discoveries in the Atlanta area.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And it's funny because those Discoveries, to me, they seem like, they came out and they were like, they're just not as cool as, the real deal Defender. But now that, 10 or 15 or gosh, I guess almost 20 years have gone on, they're kind of growing on me again. They're old enough and kind of weird enough that they're cool, I think.
Well, The cool thing about the Discos is, since there are so many of them, they're cheap and parts are cheap. And, a lot of people say they're the new series truck, but I like to think of them as a gateway drug. It's a good way to get yourself started in the Rover experience and move on from there.
It's definitely more comfortable than a series truck, I'll tell you that. If you don't.
Well, most things are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but you don't buy a series truck for the comfort.
No. But a Disco has power steering, power brakes,
self-canceling turn signals. Yes, we know the list.
Yes, windows that go up and down instead of side to side. Yeah, there's things like that. Well, James, I want to thank you for coming on the show and talking about the DemerBox.
This was a lot of fun, and I definitely encourage anyone to reach out and write if they have any questions. I'm a relative newbie to the Land Rover scene, but I love what you guys do, and I love your passion for a product that's, old and still relevant and built like a tank. And that's what I sort of hope my product is and will be, for years to come. It's something that I value and appreciate. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. That means you need to put your Land Rover pictures back on your website. Come on.
Okay, will do. I agree. It's not the same.
Your old website, as soon as the first picture that came up was a Defender, and there's people huddled around the DemerBox on the wing. It was wonderful. Now it looks like
if we can get some of our listeners to buy your product and use it and abuse it and then send pictures, will you put them on your website?
Yeah, I'll put them on my website. I'll put them on Instagram. So definitely, please get photos of a DemerBox with your Land Rover, and we'll social media the daylights out of them.
There we go. Thanks again, James. Appreciate you coming on the show. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, and I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
And that's the show this month. I want to thank our parade of personalities, as Harold calls it, for all the guests we had this month. We have Veronica Lamond, who's the author of the Landy books, Dave Bobeck, who is the blog editor for Atlantic British and It Bleeds Green, as you heard, and Bryan Joslin of Alloy and Grit magazine. You can get a discount on the subscription to Alloy and Grit by using the discount code Centresteer for a checkout, and you will get $10 off any subscription that they have. And also thanks to James Demer, DemerBox, and also you can get yourself a discount for purchasing a DemerBox, $50 off if you use the discount code Centresteer. Both of those discounts are available through the end of 2017. If you are catching up and it's in the future, it's 2018 or 2019, your SOL, I'm sorry, those discounts have expired if you're catching up. Also,
it pays to listen to the podcast in real time.
Also, thanks to the One True Packs for his production support. He really does help us make the show sound better, and I thank him for that. He does a lot of work to make that happen.
It's a lot of work to make us sound good, trust me.
Thanks to Harold for coming on the show today, and also thanks to Morgan, who could make some of the show, but not all the show. He got sick, so he couldn't join us for the normal news part. I hope you enjoyed the show. This is number 56, and thanks for listening. A reminder to visit our website for past show and show notes. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also directly support the show at patreon.com/Centresteer. If you get in touch with us, we may speak about it here on the show. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next month when we talk to Jeff Aronson of Rovers Magazine, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover fan. Thanks for listening. Wave as we pass by.
Kind of like hold on.